Hello, chat. Hello. Hello. Sorry if my throat's scratchy. I smoked a lot of weed today. I smoked a lot of keef and my throat was not ready. Hello. Hello, Starlight. Hello, Doomsday. Thank you for the compliment on my loading screen. I made it through very complicated and kind of duct tape and band-aids type of way. You know what I'm saying? The devil's lettuce. Yeah, the devil's lettuce. I'm going to hell for that. Hello. I decided we are going to be reading just today because it's Monday and I don't feel like playing video games at the moment. I just finished playing some Ballad Show and I didn't want to do it on stream because I wanted to just like lock in. Wacky tobacco. What's on tobacco? It's my favorite name for it. Awesome. I only do lean, sorry. Hi, Zoke. Um, that's fine. I wasn't saying you have to smoke the devil's lettuce and you have to give up your lean, but sure. More than poor mother. Oh, I'm fine. I feel perfectly fine. It's just that my voice might be a little. um, but yeah, it's hopefully gonna be peaceful. I have the rain going again. Hopefully the audio is good, and I've turned off the bit alerts like to be able to play sounds. I know everyone was having great fun with that last time, but I feel like it kind of defeats the purpose of the stream. Like if I'm gonna have people go crazy with alerts, I feel like I should be doing an energetic stream. But yeah, we're gonna finish the first book today, since we're halfway through already, so it shouldn't take too long. So yeah, and you're saying it's been so long. It's barely even been 4 days. It's technically been like 3 days. Anyway. Do I have the assets? Just wanted to make sure that the credits are there. I think we're fine. Okay. I hope people remember where we left off. I can give a little refresher. We were the first half last week, and we ended off about that shithead kid named Edmund or whatever the fuck had betrayed us, as we all knew he was going to. Just like he went to go to the witch's house, because chapter 9 is called In the Witch's House. So I feel like it's probably where he went. And basically, Edmund sucks ass. We hate him, but we have to go get him because a witch is gonna eat us all, or something like that. That's my recap. Hope you understand. Hope you're all caught up. And I probably should have filled up my water before I came. That would have been smart. Oh well. Oh well. Alright. Hope everyone's good, and I'm going to start now. Chapter 9. In the Witch's House. And now, of course, you want to know what had happened to Edmund. He had eaten his share of the dinner, but he hadn't really enjoyed it because he was thinking all the time about Turkish delight. Yes, Turkish delight. The most delicious creation humans have ever made. And there's nothing that spoils the taste of good ordinary food half so much as the memory of bad magic food. Bad magic? What the fuck does that mean? And he had heard the conversation and hadn't enjoyed it much either, because he kept on thinking that the others were taking no notice of him and trying to give him the cold shoulder. Bro, I'm diagnosing him with narcissism. I'm a psychiatrist now. They weren't, but he imagined it. And then he had listened until Mr. Beaver told them about Aslan, and until he had heard the whole arrangement for meeting Aslan at the stone table. It was then that he began very quietly to edge himself mature under a curtain which hung over the door. For the mention of Aslan gave him a mysterious and horrible feeling, just as it gave the others a mysterious and lovely feeling. Don't laugh. Shh, we're mature here. Be adults. We're adults. Act like adults, okay? Shh. Just as Mr. Beaver had been repeating the rhyme about Adam's flesh and Adam's bone, Edmund had been very quietly turning the door handle, and just before Mr. Beaver had begun telling them that the White Witch wasn't really human at all, but half a djinn and half a glantis, Edmund had got outside into the snow and cautiously closed the door behind him. You mustn't think that even now Edmund was quite so bad that he actually wanted his brother and sisters to be turned into stone. He did want Turkish delight and to be a prince, and later a king, and to pay Peter out for calling him a beast. As for what the witch would do with the others, he didn't want her to be particularly nice to them, certainly not to put them on the same level as himself, but he managed to believe, or to pretend he believed, that she wouldn't do anything very bad to them. Because, he said to himself, all these people who say nasty things about her are her enemies, and probably half of it isn't true. She was jolly nice to me anyway, much nicer than they are. I expect she is the rightful queen, really. Anyway, she'll be better than that awful Aslan. That's a lot of talk for someone who hasn't even met Aslan and just met the witch like a couple days ago. At least that was the excuse he made in his own mind for what he was doing. It wasn't a very good excuse, however, for deep down inside him he really knew that the White Witch was bad and cruel. The first thing he realized when he got outside and found the snow falling all around him was he had left his coat behind in the beaver's house. And of course there was no chance of going back to get it now. The next thing he realized was that the daylight was almost gone, for it had been nearly 3 o'clock when they sat down to dinner, and the winter days were short. He hadn't reckoned on this, but he had to make the best of it. So he turned up his collar and shuffled across the top of the dam. Luckily it wasn't so slippery since the snow had fallen to the far side of the river. It was pretty bad when he reached the far side. It was growing darker every minute, and what with that and the snowflakes swirling all around him, he could hardly see 3 feet ahead. And then, too, there was no road. He kept slipping into deep drifts of snow and skidding on frozen puddles and tripping over fallen tree trunks and sliding down steep banks and barking his shins against rocks till he was wet and cold and bruised all over. Jesus Christ, man. Why do I feel like there's a real war that started over Turkish delight? I wouldn't be surprised. Humanity's pretty fucking stupid. The silence and the loneliness were dreadful. In fact, I really think he might have given up on the whole plan and gone back and owned up and made friends with the others, if he hadn't happened to say to himself, "When I'm king of Narnia, the first thing I shall do will be to make some decent roads." And of course, that set him off thinking about being a king and all the other things he would do, and this cheered him up a good deal. He had just settled in his mind what sort of palace he would have, and how many cars, and all about his private cinema, and where the principal railways would run, and what laws he would make against beavers and dams, and was putting the finishing touches to some schemes for keeping Peter in his place when the weather changed. First the snow stopped, then a wind sprang up, and it became freezing cold. Finally, the clouds rolled away and the moon came out. It was a full moon, and shining on all that snow, it made everything almost as bright as day. Only the shadows were rather confusing. He would never have found his way if the moon hadn't come out by the time he got to the other river. You remember, he had seen, when they first arrived at the beavers, a smaller river flowing into the great one lower down. He now reached this and turned to follow it up. But the little valley down which it came was much steeper and rockier than the one he had just left, and much overgrown with bushes, so that he could not have managed it at all in the dark. Even as it was, he got wet through, for he had to stop under oh my god, the wording is really fucking me up. Stoop under branches, and great loads of snow came sliding off onto his back. Every time this happened, he thought more and more how he hated Peter, just as if this all had been Peter's fault. But at last he came to a part where it was more level and the valley opened out. And there, on the other side of the river, quite close to him, in the middle of a little plain between two hills, he saw what must have been the White Witch's house. And the moon was shining brighter than ever. The house was a really small castle. It seemed to be all towers, little towers with long pointed spires on them, sharp as needles. They looked like huge dunce's caps or sorcerer's caps, and they shone in the moonlight, and their long shadows looked strange on the snow. Edmund began to be afraid of the house, but it was too late to think of turning back now. He crossed the river on the ice and walked up to the house. There was nothing stirring, not the slightest sound anywhere. Even his own feet made no noise on the deep, newly fallen snow. He walked on, past corner after corner of the house, and past turret after turret to find the door. He had to go right round to the far side before he found it. It was a huge ark, but the great iron gate stood wide open. Edmund crept up to the ark and looked inside into the courtyard, and there he saw a sight that nearly made his heart stop beating. Just inside the gate, with the moonlight shining on it, stood an enormous lion crouched as if it was ready to spring. And Edmund stood in the shadow of the ark, afraid to go on and afraid to go back, with his knees knocking together. I think I'm supposed to be saying arch, not ark. Noah's ark. Arch. He stood there so long that his teeth would have been chattering with cold, even if they had not been chattering with fear. How long this really lasted, I don't know, but it seemed to Edmund to last for hours. Then at last he began to wonder why the lion was standing so still, for it hadn't moved 1 inch since he first set eyes on it. Edmund now ventured a little nearer, still keeping in the shadow of the arch as much as he could. He now saw from the way the lion was standing that it couldn't have been looking at him at all. But supposing it turns its head, thought Edmund. In fact, it was staring at something else, namely a little dwarf who stood with his back to it about 4 feet away. Oh, random dwarf. Dwarf cameo. Aha, thought Edmund. When it springs at the dwarf, then will be my chance to escape. But still the lion never moved, nor did the dwarf. And now at last Edmund remembered what the others had said about the white witch turning people into stone. Perhaps this was only a stone lion. And as soon as he had thought of that, he noticed that the lion's back and the top of his head were covered with snow. Of course it must only be a statue. No living animal would have let itself get covered with snow. Then very slowly, and with his heart beating as if it would burst, Edmund ventured to go up to the lion. Even now he hardly dared to touch it, but at last he put out his hand, very quickly, and did. It was cold stone. He had been frightened of a mere statue. The relief got warm all over, right down to his toes, and at the same time there came into his head what seemed a perfectly lovely idea. Probably, he thought, this is the great lion Aslan that they were all talking about. She's caught him already and turned him into stone. So that's the end of all their fine ideas about him. Pooh! Who's afraid of Aslan? It's a lot of... I would not be daring to think such thoughts if I were a small Victorian boy or whatever. And he stood there gloating over the stone lion, and presently he did something very silly and childish. He took a stump of lead pencil out of his pocket and scribbled a mustache on the lion's upper lip and a pair of spectacles on its eyes. Then he said, "Yeah, silly old Aslan, how do you like being a stone? You thought yourself mighty fine, didn't you?" But in spite of the scribbles on its face, the great stone beast still looked so terrible and sad and noble, staring up in the moonlight, that Edmund didn't really get any fun out of jeering at it. He turned away and began to cross the courtyard. He is literally insane. No sane person would do something like that. Absolutely not. As he got into the middle of it, he saw that there were dozens of statues all about, standing here and there rather as the pieces stand on a chessboard when it was halfway through the game. There were sown... I do not know how to say this word. There were sown satyrs, and stone wolves, and bears, and foxes, and a cat, and mountains of stone. There were lovely stone shapes that looked like women, but who were really the spirits of the trees. There was the great shape of a centaur, and a winged horse, and a long, lithe creature that Edmund took to be a dragon. They all looked so strange standing there perfectly lifelike and also perfectly still, in the bright cold moonlight, that it was eerie work crossing the courtyard. Right in the very middle stood a huge shape like a man, but as tall as a tree, with a fierce face and a shaggy beard, and a great club in its hand. Even though he knew that it was only a stone giant and not a live one, Edmund did not like going past it. That's like me. Have you ever been to one of those like robot dinosaur zoos? It's like there's just a bunch of animatronic dinosaurs, and even though I know for a fact at my grown age that they are not real, when I have to walk past one of the big ones like the fucking T-Rex, it scared me so bad. I have not. Well, that's a thing. here at least, and I've gone to it multiple times, and I still to this day do not like walking past the big fucking T-Rex dude that moves a bunch. It still freaks me out, even though I know damn well it's not gonna actually touch me. I don't know, it's scary. And I have to like pretend that I'm not scared of it, because that's like a huge ego hit. I've been to a zoo that had dire wolves that are big as lions. That's crazy. Sheesh. I haven't been to any zoos where they have anything like super crazy like that, I don't think. But I think that's because most of the places that are like that are super kind of sort of sketchy sometimes. Anyhow. He now saw that there was a dim light showing from a doorway on the far side of the courtyard. He went to it. There was a flight of stone steps going up to an open door. Edmund went up them. Across the threshold lay a great wolf. "It's all right. It's all right," he kept saying to himself. "It's only a stone wolf. It can't hurt me." And he raised his leg to step over it. Instantly the huge creature rose, with all the hair bristling along its back, opened a great red mouth, and said in a growling voice, "Who's there? Who's there? Stand still, stranger, and tell me who you are." "If you please, sir," said Edmund, trembling so that he could hardly speak, "my name is Edmund, and I'm the son of Adam that Her Majesty met in the wood the other day. I've come to bring her the news that my brother and sisters are now in Narnia, quite close, in the beaver's house. She wanted to see them." "I will tell Her Majesty," said the wolf. "Meanwhile, stand still on the threshold, as you value your life." Then it vanished into the old house. Well, that's really fucking scary. Edmund stood and waited, his fingers arching with cold and his heart pounding in his chest. And presently the grey wolf, Malgrim, the chief of the witches' secret police, came bounding back and said, come in, fortunate favourite of the queen, or else not so fortunate." And Edmund went in, taking great care not to tread on the wolf's paws. Found himself in a long gloomy hall with many pillars, full, as the courtyard had been, of statues. The one nearest the door was a little fawn with a very sad expression on its face, and Edmund couldn't help wondering if this might be Lucy's friend. The only light came from a single lamp, and close beside this sat the White Witch. "I'm come, your Majesty," said Edmund, rushing eagerly forward. "How dare you come alone?" said the witch in a terrible voice. "Did I not tell you to bring the others with you?" "Please, your Majesty," said Edmund, "I've done the best I can. I've brought them quite close. They're in the little house on top of the dam just up the river with Mr. and Mrs. Beaver." A slow, cruel smile came over the witch's face. "Is this all your news?" she asked. "No, your Majesty," said Edmund, and proceeded to tell her all he had heard before leaving the beaver's house. "What? Aslan?" cried the queen. "Aslan, is this true? If I find you have lied to me—" "Please, I'm only repeating what they said," stammered Edmund. But the queen, who was no longer attending to him, clapped her hands. Instantly the same dwarf whom Edmund had seen with her before appeared. "Make ready our sledge," ordered the witch, "and use the harness without bells." "Ooh, bro, they're, they're just gonna go murk 'em, I don't know. And that is the end of chapter 9. I like how it's like supposed to be so deep, it's like, get the sledge and use the harness without the funny little jingly bells. I love that. Chapter 10. The spell begins to break. Now, we must go back to Mr. and Mrs. Beaver and the 3 other children. As soon as Mr. Beaver said, "There's no time to lose," everyone began bundling themselves into coats, except Mrs. Beaver, who started picking up sacks and laying them on the table and said, "Now, Mr. Beaver, just reach down that ham, and here's a packet of tea, and there's sugar and some matches. If someone will get 2 or 3 loaves out of the crock over there in the corner." I feel like if you're going out to eat and you need like food, I feel like tea and sugar are not really gonna sustain you. "What are you doing, Mrs. Beaver?" exclaimed Susan. "Packing a loaf for each of us, dearie," said Mrs. Beaver very coolly. You didn't think we'd set out on a journey with nothing to eat, did you? But we haven't time, said Susan, buttoning the collar of her coat. She may be here any minute. That's what I say, chimed in Mr. Beaver. Get along with you all, said his wife. Think it over, Mr. Beaver. She can't be here for a quarter of an hour at least. But don't we want as big of a start as we can possibly get? Said Peter. If we've to reach the stone table before... Oh, I didn't finish reading. If we're to reach the stone table before her? You've got to remember that, Mrs. Beaver, said Susan. As soon as she has looked in here and finds that we're gone, she'll be off at top speed. That she will, said Mrs. Beaver, but we can't get there before her whatever we do, for she'll be on a sledge, and we'll all be walking. Then have we no hope? Said Susan. Now don't you get fussing, there's a deer, said Mrs. Beaver. I don't understand all this old wording. It's just there's a deer, not like the animal, but like E-A, deer. But just get half a dozen clean handkerchiefs out of the drawer. Of course we've got a hope. We can't get there before her, but we can keep under cover and go by ways she won't expect, and perhaps we'll get through. Dear, yeah, like that. That's true enough, Mrs. Beaver, said her husband, but it's time we were out of this. Like the term, yeah. She says, now don't you get fussing. There's a deer. I don't know what it means. That's true enough, Mrs. Beaver, said her husband, but it's time we were out of this. And don't you start fussing either, Mr. Beaver, said his wife. There, that's better. There's 5 loads, and the smallest for the smallest of us. That's for you, my dear, she added, looking at Lucy. My throat is trying to kill me. Oh, do please come on, said Lucy. Well, I'm nearly ready now, answered Mrs. Beaver at last, allowing her husband to help her into her snow boots. I suppose the sewing machine took heavy to bring. I think that's a typo. Yes, it is, said Mr. Beaver. A great deal too heavy. And you don't think you'll be able to use it while we're on the run, I suppose. I can't abide the thought of that witch fiddling with it, said Mrs. Beaver, and breaking it or stealing it as likely as not. Oh, please, please, please do hurry, said the 3 children. So at last they all got outside, and Mr. Beaver locked the door. It'll delay her a bit, he said, and they set off, all carrying their loads over their shoulders. The snow had stopped, and the moon had come out when they began their journey. They went in single file, first Mr. Beaver, then Lucy, then Peter, then Susan, and Mrs. Beaver last of all. Mr. Beaver led them across the dam and onto the right bank of a river, and then along a very rough sort of path among the trees right down by the river bank. The sides of the valley, shining in the moonlight, towered up far above them on either hand. Best keep down here as much as possible, she said. Shall have to keep up to the top, for you couldn't bring a sledge down here. It would have been a pretty enough scene to look at, as though it were a window from a comfortable armchair, and even as things were, Lucy enjoyed it at first. As they went on walking and walking and walking, and as the sack she was carrying felt heavier and heavier, she began to wonder how she was going to keep up at all. She stopped looking at the dazzling brightness of the frozen river with all its waterfalls of ice, and at the white masses of the treetops, and the great glaring moon, and the countless stars, and could only watch the little short legs of Mr. Beaver going pat, 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 pat through the snow in front of her, as if they were never going to stop. Calling someone their dear makes sense, but saying, oh, there's a deer, doesn't seem right. Yeah, it doesn't seem right. I feel like it's just like a way people used to talk, because this book is old as all fuck, you know? Then the moon disappeared, and the snow began to fall once more. And at last Lucy was so tired that she was almost asleep and walking at the same time, when suddenly she found that Mr. Beaver had turned away from the river bank to the right and was leading them steeply uphill into the very thickest bushes. and then she came fully awake, she found that Mr. Beaver was just vanishing into a little hole in the bank, which had been almost hidden under the bushes until we were quite on top of it. In fact, by the time she realized what was happening, only his short flat tail was showing. Lucy immediately stooped down and crawled in after him. Then she heard noises of scrambling and puffing and panting behind her, and in a moment all 5 of them were inside. Oh God, I have claustrophobia. This sounds terrible. "Whoever is this?" said Peter's voice, sounding tired and pale in the darkness. I hope you know what I mean by a voice sounding pale. I feel like my voice sounds pale right now. That's written in there in brackets, by the way. "It's an old hiding place for beavers in bad times," said Mr. Beaver, "and a great secret. It's not much of a place, but we must get a few hours' sleep. If you hadn't all been such a plaguey fuss when we were starting, I'd have brought some pillows," said Mrs. Beaver. "It wasn't nearly such a nice cave as Mr. Tumnus's, though," Lucy thought. "Just a hole in the ground, but dry and earthy. It was very small, so that when they all lay down they were all a bundle of clothes together, and what with that and being warmed up by their long walk, they were really rather snug. If only the floor of the cave had been a little smoother." Then Mrs. Beaver handed round in the dark a little flask out of which everyone drank something. It made one cough and sputter a little and stung the throat, but it also made you feel deliciously warm after you swallowed it. Everyone went straight to sleep. Mrs. Beaver just drugged everyone. Damn, okay. It seemed to Lucy only the next minute, though really it was hours and hours later, when she woke up feeling a little cold and dreadfully stiff and thinking how she would like a hot bath. Then she felt a set of long whiskers tickling her cheek and saw the cold daylight coming in through the mouth of the cave. But immediately after that she was very wide awake indeed, and so was everyone else. In fact, they were all sitting up with their mouths and eyes wide open, listening to a sound which was the very sound they'd all been thinking of, and sometimes imagining they heard, during their walk last night. It was the sound of jingling bells. Well, that can't be the White Witch, because she said to grab the harness without the bells. Mr. Beaver was out of the cave like a flash the moment he heard it. Perhaps you think, as Lucy thought for a moment, that this was a very silly thing to do. But it was really a very sensible one. He knew he could scramble to the top of the bank among bushes and brambles without being seen, and he wanted above all things to see which way the witch's sledge went. The others all sat in the cave waiting and wondering. They waited nearly 5 minutes. Then they heard something that frightened them very much. They heard voices. "Oh," thought Lucy, "he's been seen. She's caught him." Great was their surprise when a little later they heard Mr. Beaver's voice calling to them from just outside the cave. "It's all right," he was shouting. "Come out, Mrs. Beaver, come out. Sons and daughters of Adam. It's all right. It isn't her. See, I told you." This was bad grammar, of course, but that is how beavers talk when they are excited. I mean, in Narnia. In our world, they usually don't talk at all. So Mrs. Beaver and the children came bundling out of the cave, all blinking in the daylight, with earth all over them, and looking very frosty and unbrushed and uncombed, and with the sleep in their eyes. "Come on," cried Mr. Beaver, who was almost dancing with delight. "Come and see. This is a nasty knock for the witch. It looks as if her power is already crumbling." "What do you mean, Mr. Beaver?" panted Peter as they all scrambled up the steep bank of the valley together. "Didn't I tell you?" answered Mr. Beaver. "That she'd made it always winter and never Christmas? Didn't I tell you? Well, just come and see." And they were all at the top and did see. It was a sledge, and it was reindeer with bells on their harness. But they were far bigger than the witch's reindeer, and they were not white but brown. Santa? On the sledge sat a person whom everyone knew the moment they set eyes on him. He was a huge man, in a bright red robe, bright as holly berries, with a hood that had fur inside it, and a great white beard that felt like a foamy waterfall over his chest. "It's fucking Santa!" In that context, you assume they were talking about the wild animal deer. Example, "Hello deer, oh there's a deer." Yeah, exactly. That's what it sounds like, but that's not what it is talking about. What the fuck? Do not harass. I don't know if you know, dude, but do not, do not harass random people. Oh my god. Zoke is asking you, does it jiggle, Doom? What does that mean? I You know what? You don't need to know. It's okay. Just ignore him. Okay. Everyone knew him because though you see people of his sort only in Narnia, you see pictures of them and hear them talked about even in our world, the world on this side of the wardrobe door. But when you really see them in Narnia, it is rather different. Does your money jiggle? I don't even know what that means. Some of the pictures of Father Christmas in our world make him look only funny and jolly. Now that the children actually stood looking at him and they didn't find it quite like that. He was so big and so glad and so real that they all became quite small. He felt very glad, but also solemn. "I've come at last," said he. "She has kept me out for a long time, but I have got in at last. Aslan is on the move, the witch's magic is weakening." My money don't jiggle jiggle. It old. I know that song was really popular, but what is that supposed to mean? Is there like an explanation of the lore behind these lyrics? What money jiggles? Oh, wait, wait, I think I just figured it out. My money don't jiggle jiggle, it folds. I feel like it's meant to say, sort of be like jingle. I feel like it's meant to say that he doesn't have coins, he has bills. Yeah, I just figured that out just now. Yeah. Okay, well, that makes sense now. But I feel like jiggle is kind of not the right word. I feel like it should be jingle. Jingle, jingle, or something, you know? Jiggle makes me think slime. Jingle is like coins. Anyhow, that's off topic. And Lucy felt running through her that deep shiver of gladness which you only get if you're being solemn and still. "And now," said Father Christmas, "for your presents, there's a new and better sewing machine for you, Mrs. Beaver. I'll drop it in your house as I pass." "How about like a fucking battle axe? How about that?" "If you please, sir," said Mrs. Beaver, making a curtsy. "It's locked up." "Locks and bolts make no difference to me," said Father Christmas. "And as for you, Mr. Beaver, when you get home you will find your dam finished and mended, and all the leaks stopped, and a new sluice gate fitted." Wow, it's pretty fucking nice. Mr. Beaver was so pleased that he opened his mouth very wide, and then found he couldn't say anything at all. "Peter, Adam's son," said Father Christmas. "Here, sir," said Peter. "These are your presents," was the answer, "and they are tools, not toys. Time to use them is perhaps near at hand. Bear them well." With these words he handed to Peter a shield and a sword. Oh my god, he really did. The shield was the color of silver, and across it there rambled a red lion, as bright as a ripe strawberry at the moment when you pick it. The hilt of the sword was of gold, and it had a sheath and a sword belt and everything it needed, and it was just the right size and weight for Peter to use. Peter was silent and solemn as he received these gifts, for he felt they were a very serious kind of present. Is it British rap? It is? We getting lit or what? Yeah, we're getting lit and reading bedtime stories. Hello, Chris. How are you? "Susan, Eve's daughter," said Father Christmas. "These are for you." And he handed her a bow and a quiver full of arrows and a little ivory horn. "You must use the bow only in great need," he said, "for I do not mean you to fight in the battle. It does not easily miss, and when you put this horn to your lips and blow it, then, wherever you are, I think help of some kind will come to you." Well, that's really cool. Last of all, he said, "Lucy, Eve's daughter," and Lucy came forward. He gave her a little bottle of what looked like glass, but people said afterwards that was made of diamond, and a small dagger. "In this bottle," he said, "there is a cordial made of the juice of one of the 5 fire flowers that grow in the mountains of the sun. If you or any of your friends is hurt, a few drops of this restore them. And the dagger is to defend yourself at great need, for you are also not to be in battle." "Why, sir?" said Lucy. I don't know, but I think I could be brave enough." "That is not the point," he said, "but battles are ugly when women fight." Me when misogyny. "And now," here he suddenly looked less grave, "here is something for the moment for you all," and he brought out I suppose from the big bag at his back, but nobody quite saw him do it, a large tray containing 5 cups and saucers, a bowl of lump sugar, a jug of cream, and a great big teapot all sizzling and piping hot. Then he cried out, "Merry Christmas! Long live the true king!" and cracked his whip, and he and the reindeer and the sledge were all out of sight before anyone realized that they had started. Peter had just drawn his sword out of its sheath and was showing it to Mr. Beaver, when Mrs. Beaver said, now then, don't stand there talking there till the tea's got cold. Just like men. Come and help to carry the tray down. We'll have breakfast." What a mercy, I thought, of bringing the bread knife. So down the steep bank they went, and back to the cave, and Mr. Beaver cut some of the bread and ham into sandwiches, and Mrs. Beaver poured out the tea, and everyone enjoyed themselves. But long before they had finished enjoying themselves, Mr. Beaver said, "Time to be moving on now." Damn, Santa's swag. Hell yeah, I'm good, Roby. I'm glad you're good. I'm alright. I'm just chilling. I'm just chilling reading this book, other than the fact I wish my throat was not so fucking raspy at the moment. But it's my own fault. Does it grip? What does that mean? Hello. We are now, that is the end of chapter 10. How many chapters are there again? Just to remind, we're on chapter 11 now. Let's go check. There are 17 chapters. Okay. Cool. Now I gotta find where the hell I was. Whoopsie. Okay. There. Oh. Chris on mod duty. We finally have a mod in chat for once. Okay. Chapter 11. Aslan is nearer. Edmund, meanwhile, had been having a most disappointing time. When the dwarf had gone to the sledge ready, he had expected that the witch would start being nice to him, as she had been at their last meeting, but she said nothing at all. When at last Edmund plucked up his courage to say, "Please, your majesty, could I have some Turkish delight? You said," she answered, "Silence, fool." Then she appeared to change her mind, and said, as if to herself, "And yet it will not do to have the brat fainting on the way," and once more clapped her hands. Another dwarf appeared. "Bring the human creature food and drink," she said. The dwarf went away, and presently returned bringing an iron bowl with some water in it, and an iron plate with a hunk of dry bread on it. He grinned in a repulsive manner as he sat them down on the floor beside Edmund and said, "Turkish delight for little prince, ha ha ha." "Take it away," said Edmund sulkily. "I don't want dry bread." But the witch suddenly turned on him with such a terrible expression on her face that he, apologized, began to nibble at the bread, though it was so stale he could hardly get it down. "You made glad enough of it before you taste bread again," said the witch. While he was still chewing away, the first dwarf came back and announced that the sledge was ready. The White Witch rose and went out, ordering Edmund to go with her. The snow was again falling as they came into the courtyard, but she took no notice of that and made Edmund sit beside her on the sledge. And he's still on her side. She's being obviously evil, make him eat stale bread, and he's still on her side helping her out. Make it make sense. This kid is so dumb. But before they drove off, she called Mogrim, and he came bounding like an enormous dog to the side of the sledge. Well, he is an enormous dog. "Take with you the swiftest of your wolves, and go at once to the house of the beavers," said the witch, "and kill whatever you find there. If they are already gone, then make all speed to the stone table, but do not be seen. Wait for me there in hiding. I meanwhile must go many miles to the west before I find a place where I can drive across the river. You may overtake these humans before they reach the stone table. You will know what to do if you find them." "I hear and obey, O Queen," growled the wolf, and immediately he shot away into the snow and darkness as quickly as a horse can gallop. In a few minutes he had called another wolf and was with him down on the dam, sniffing at the beaver's house. But of course they found it empty. It would have been a dreadful thing for the beavers and the children if the night had remained fine, for the wolves would then have been able to follow their trail, and 10 to 1 would have overtaken them before they had got to the cave. But now that the snow had begun again, the scent was cold, and even the footprints were covered up. Meanwhile, the dwarf whipped up the reindeer, and the witch and Edmund drove out under the archway and on and away into the darkness and cold. This was a terrible journey for Edmund, who had no coat. Before they had been going quarter of an hour, all the front of him was covered with snow. He soon stopped trying to shake it off, because as quickly as he did that, a new lot gathered, and he was so tired. Soon he was wet to the skin, and oh, how miserable he was. It didn't look now as if the witch intended to make him a king. All the things he had said to make himself believe that she was good and kind, and that her side was really the right side, sounded to him silly now. He would have given anything to meet the others at this moment, even Peter. The only way to comfort himself now was to try and believe that the whole thing was a dream and that he might wake up at any moment. And as they went on, hour after hour, it did come to seem like a dream. I have no sympathy for Edmund. Dang hecka good at modding. So, do you speak English? Is that a language you speak? I don't know what any of these messages mean. I just feel like I'm reading Latin. I feel like I'm reading Latin, Zoke. You're saying I'm hella good at modding? Oh, I see. It's because you really are so good at modding, Chris. Like, it's amazing. Can't believe you do it for free. This lasted longer than I could describe, even if I wrote pages and pages about it. But I will skip on to the time when the snow had stopped and the morning had come and they were racing along in the daylight. And still they went on, with no sound but the everlasting swish of snow and the creaking of the reindeer's harness. And then at last the witch said, "What have we here? Stop." And they did. How Edmund hoped she was going to say something about breakfast, but she had stopped for quite a different reason. A little way off, at the foot of a tree, sat a merry party, a squirrel and his wife with their children, and 2 satyrs and a wife and an old dog fox, all on stools round a table. Edmund couldn't quite see what they were eating, but it smelled lovely, and there seemed to be decorations of holly, and he wasn't at all sure that he didn't see something like a plum pudding. It's Christmas. At the moment when the sledge stopped, the fox, who was obviously the oldest person present, had just risen to its feet, holding a glass in its right paw as if it was going to say something. Chat, should I get paid? Me English isn't so good. I'm a 52-year-old man from Russia on my way to become pro gamer. I'm also 52. That's such a funny coincidence. Mo, you can't stand in front of the screen. I have to read the words on the screen. Mo. Momo. Move. She's just staring me into my soul. Come on, move your ass. Chat agrees. One person agrees with you. You can't just call one person chat. But when the whole party saw the sledge stopping and who was in it, all the gaiety went out of their faces. Momo, come here. Stop. The father squirrel stopped eating with his fork halfway to his mouth, and one of the satyrs stopped with his fork actually in its mouth, and the baby squirrel squeaked with terror. Oh my god, even the babies know what's up. What is the meaning of this? Asked the witch queen. Nobody answered. Speak, vermin, she said again. Do you want my dwarf to find you a tongue with his whip? What is the meaning of all this gluttony, this waste, this self-indulgence? Where did you get all these things? Please, your majesty, said the fox, we were given them. And if I might make so bold as to drink your majesty's very good health. Who gave them to you? Said the witch. Father Christmas, stammered the fox. What? Roared the witch, springing from the sledge and taking a few strides nearer to the terrified animals. He has not been here. He cannot have been here. How dare you? But no. Say you have been lying, and you shall even now be forgiven. At that moment, one of the young squirrels lost his head completely. Yes, it squeaked, beating its little spoon on the table. Edmund saw the witch bite her lips so that a drop of blood appeared on her white cheek. Then she raised her wand. Oh, don't. "Please don't," shouted Edmund, but even while he was shouting, she waved her wand, and instantly, where the merry party had been, there were only statues of creatures, one with its stone fork fixed forever halfway to its stone mouth, seated around a stone table on which there were stone plates and a stone plum pudding. What the fuck? She's insane. No one in chat other than me and him have messaged since, so everyone that answered it said yes. Well, I know, but if chat is empty, then you don't have very much leeway to bargain with if chat is pretty empty, you know? If if everyone in the room agrees and there's only one other person in the room, I don't think you can really call that and be like, "Oh, it's a majority vote." You need a bigger sample size. Like if you were doing an experiment, no one would take this seriously. Like if this was in your hypothesis that you tested it on a group of 2 people, then even 3 people, you need more than 2 or 3. You know what I could do? So people agree you should get paid? I could also just unmod you. And you wouldn't have to do anything at all. And then there's no point in me paying you because you wouldn't be a mod anymore because I can just do the things you do myself. It's not hard to click on someone and say timeout for 600 seconds for asking me if it grips. It's not difficult. I could just do it myself. So let me know. Who asked that? Someone. My react time is just faster, like that's worth hella money. I could have done it faster than you had I gave a shit. I just was literally too lazy to care to do it, and so seeing you do it, like, oh, okay. I didn't even expect you to do it. Nuh-uh, no. You can't say nuh-uh to me. I could have done it. I saw it. I read it. I simply turned back to my book and started reading. And guess what? I also have the power to time you out. For as long as I want. I don't know how long I timed you out for, but I timed you out. 600 seconds. Mod is timed out. Twitch is funny. Timing them out removes mod. Oh no. Now I'm not gonna have to spend money because Twitch has bullying me. Can't win the vote if you ban all the voters? Exactly. As for you, said the witch, giving Edmund a stunning blow in the face as she remounted the sledge, let that teach you to ask favor for spies and traitors. Drive on. And Edmund, for the first time in this story, felt sorry for someone besides himself. It seemed so pitiful to think of those little stone figures sitting there all the silent days and all the dark nights, year after year, till the moss grew on them, and at last even their faces crumbled away. Now they were steadily racing on again, and soon Edmund noticed that the snow which splashed against them as they rushed through it was much wetter than it had been all last night. At the same time, he noticed that he was feeling much less cold. It was also becoming foggy. In fact, every minute it grew foggier and warmer, and the sledge was not running nearly as well as it had been running up until now. At first he thought that this was because the reindeer were tired. Soon he saw that couldn't be the real reason. The sledge jerked and skidded and kept on jolting as if it had struck against stones, and however the dwarf whipped the poor reindeer, the sledge went slower and slower. There also seemed to be a curious noise all round them, but the noise of their driving and jolting and the dwarf shouting at the reindeer prevented Edmund from hearing what it was, till suddenly the sledge stuck so fast that it wouldn't go on at all. When that happened, there was a moment's silence, and in that silence Edmund could at last listen to the other noise properly. A strange, sweet, rustling, chattering noise, and yet not so strange, for he'd heard it before. If only he could remember where. Then all at once he did remember. It It was the noise of running water. All around them through the night there were streams, chattering, murmuring, bubbling, splashing, and even, in the distance, roaring. And his heart gave a great leap, though he hardly knew why, when he realized that the frost was over. Much nearer there was a drip, drip, drip from the branches of all the trees. And then, as he looked at one tree, he saw a great load of snow slide off of it, and for the first time since he had entered Narnia, he saw the dark green of a fir tree. But he hadn't time to listen or watch any longer, for the witch said, "Don't sit staring, fool. Get out and help." And of course, Edmund had to obey. Ask any question you want. I've noticed that the chat message has been there for a while and nobody is. He stepped out into the snow, but it was really only slush by now, and began helping the dwarf to get the sledge out of the muddy hole it had got into. They got it out in the end, and by being very cruel to the reindeer, the dwarf managed to get it on the move again, and they drove a little further. And now the snow was really melting in earnest, and patches of green grass were beginning to appear in every direction. Unless you have looked at a world of snow as long as Edmund had been looking at it, you will hardly begin to imagine what a relief those green patches were after all that endless white. And the sledge stopped again. "It's no good, your majesty," said the dwarf. "We can't sledge in this thaw." "Then we must walk," said the witch. "We shall never overtake them walking," growled the dwarf. "Not with the start they've got." "Are you my counselor or my slave?" said the witch. Me at Chris. "Do as you're told. Tie the hands of the human creature behind it and keep hold of the end of the rope, and take your whip and cut the harness of the reindeer. They'll find their own way home." It's putting a lot of trust in these reindeer. The dwarf obeyed, and in a few minutes Edmund found himself being forced to walk as fast as he could with his hands tied behind him. He kept on slipping in the slush and mud and wet grass, and every time he slipped the dwarf gave him a curse and sometimes a flick with the whip. The witch walked behind the dwarf and kept on saying, "Faster, faster." Every moment the patches of green grew bigger, and the patches of spow grew smaller. Every moment more and more of the trees shook off their robes of snow. Soon, wherever you looked, instead of white shapes, you saw the dark green of firs or the black prickly branches of bare oaks and beeches and elms. Then the mist turned from white to gold and presently cleared away altogether. Shafts of delicious sunlight struck down onto the forest floor, and overhead you could see a blue sky between the treetops. Soon there were more wonderful things happening. Coming suddenly round a corner into a glade of silver birch trees, Edmund saw the ground covered in all directions with little yellow flowers. Celandines. Celandines? The noise of water grew louder. Presently they actually crossed a stream. Beyond it they found snowdrops growing. "Mind your own business," said the dwarf when he saw that Edmund had turned his head to look at them, and he gave the rope a vicious jerk. But of course this didn't prevent Edmund from seeing. Only 5 minutes later he noticed a dozen crocuses growing round the foot of an old tree, gold and purple and white. Then came a sound even more delicious than the sound of the water. Close beside the path they were following a bird suddenly chirped from the branch of the tree. It was answered by the chuckle of another bird a little farther off. And then, as if that had been a signal, there was chattering and chirruping in every direction, and then a moment of full song, and within 5 minutes the whole wood was ringing with birds' music, and wherever Edmund's eyes turned he saw birds alighting on branches, or sailing overhead, or chasing another, or having their little quarrels, or tidying up their feathers with their beaks. "Faster, faster," said the witch. There was no trace of the fog now. The sky became bluer and bluer, and now there were white clouds hurrying across it from time to time. In the wide glades there were primroses. A light breeze sprang up, which scattered drops of moisture from the swaying branches and carried cool, delicious scents against the faces of the travelers. The trees began to come fully alive. The larches and birches were covered with green, and the laburnums with gold. Soon the beech trees had put forth their delicate, transparent leaves. As the travelers walked under them, the light also became green. A bee buzzed across their path. "This is no thaw," said the dwarf, suddenly stopping. "This is spring. What are we to do? Your winter has been destroyed, I tell you. This is Aslan's doing." "If either of you mention that name again," said the witch, shall instantly be killed. Bro, she's yikes. She's like, yikes. And that's the end of chapter 11. I hope it's like a really gory scene or something. I can picture. Hold up, I want to look up what she looks like in the movie. The White Witch Narnia movie. I'm gonna look up what she looks like. Oh yeah, I remember her. She looks so weird, but like so good for the character. Oh, she looks actually sick. Like, it's pretty old, but like I just think the character design they chose for her was so good. Hell yeah. What, Momo? What? What, Momo? You're getting in the way of bedtime story, Momo. Momo. I'm gonna have to start kicking you out. Genuinely. Go, go chill. I slap you with my empty bottle. Also, I was thinking tomorrow maybe we could I can maybe try to set up crowd control, if anyone knows what that is. Where people, for example, you can connect it to your games and people can pay money to make shit happen. But like you can set the prices really low. So I was watching an old video of Slimesicles, where he was playing Minecraft, and so like you could pay 10 cents for a bee or 15 bucks for a creeper or something crazy like that. And I thought that would be fun if I could figure out how to set that up. And I would make things pretty cheap. But I think it could be fun. And I also have rollbacks on my Minecraft server. So we should all be good. So that might happen tomorrow if I can figure it out before then. Alright. Chapter 12. Peter's First Battle. While the dwarf and the white witch were saying this, miles away the beavers and the children were walking on hour after hour into what seemed a delicious dream. Long ago they had left the coats behind them, and by now they had even stopped saying to one another, "Look, there's a kingfisher," or "I say, bluebells," or "What was that lovely smell?" or "Just listen to that thrush." They walked in silence, drinking it all in, passing through patches of warm sunlight into cool, green thickets, and out again into wide, mossy glades where tall elms raised the leafy roof far overhead, and then into dense masses of overflowing currant, and among hawthorn bushes where the sweet smell was almost overpowering. Sounds nice, dude. They had been just as surprised as Edmund when they saw the winter vanishing and the whole wood passing in a few hours or so from January to May. They hadn't even known for certain, as the witch did. Bro, why'd you ask actually time me out for 10 minutes? What the fuck? Because you were being sassy, that's why. Also, it still says you're a mod on this menu. I kind of feel like it's tripping out, though, because it's not there. Let me just do the command. Can a man not be sassy? Are you sexist? You act like I fucking threw you in a dungeon. I timed you out in my Twitch chat for 10 minutes. Are you sexist? Yeah, I'm a I'm... Oh my god, how do I say? I'm a misandrist. Misandry. I don't know how to fucking pronounce it. You did, basically? Okay. Okay, bud. Okay. Is that even a word? It is a word. I just don't know how to pronounce it. It's the opposite of misogyny, misandry. Okay, where the fuck was I? They hadn't even known for certain, as the witch did, that this was what would happen when Aslan came to Narnia. But they all knew that it was her spells which had produced the endless winter, and therefore they all knew when this magic spring began that something had gone wrong, and badly wrong, with the witch's schemes. And after the thaw had been going on for some time, they all realized that the witch would no longer be able to use her sledge. After that, they didn't hurry so much, and they allowed themselves more rests and longer ones. They were pretty tired by now, of course, but not what I'd call bitterly tired, only slow and feeling very dreamy and quiet inside, as one does when one is coming to the end of a long day in the open. Susan had a slight blister on one heel. Dude, blisters are actually one of those painful things I've ever experienced, and I've experienced some crazy painful shit. You damn misandry or something. You got me there. Blisters? Yeah. Have you ever gotten like a big... Have you ever been walking and you get like a big ass blister on your right on your heel, and you have to keep walking, and then you try and like treat it once you're done? It's so fucking painful, dude. It's so painful. So painful. And like I'm trying to put like numbing on it and it burns so bad. Got a burn blister. Burns also really fucking hurt. I showed you, I think, probably. You showed me a lot of your... Momo, baby, I don't understand you fundamentally. I just don't. I don't. I don't at all. You make no sense to me. What? Your little cat brain is malfunctioning. Squeezing her. Squeezing her little face. Oh, my bad if you don't want to see. No, I don't mind. It's just, it's kind of a thing now. You know? Okay. They had left the course of the big river some time ago, for one had to turn a little to the right, that meant a little to the south, to reach the place of the stone table. Even if this had not been their way, they couldn't have kept to the river valley once the thaw began, for with all that melting snow, the river was soon in flood, a wonderful, roaring, thundering yellow flood, and their path would have been under water. Now the sun got low, and the light got redder, and the shadows got longer, the flowers began to think about closing. Not long now, said Mr. Beaver, and began leading them uphill across some very deep, springy moss. It felt nice under their tired feet, in a place where only tall trees grew, very wide apart. The climb, coming at the end of the long day, made them all pant and blow. And just as Lucy was wondering whether she could really get to the top without another long rest, suddenly they were at the top, and this is what they saw. They were on a green open space from which you could look down on the forest spreading as far as one could see in every direction, except right ahead. There, far to the east, was something twinkling and moving. By gum, whispered Peter to Susan. The sea! In the very middle of this open hilltop was the stone table. It was a great grim slab of gray stones poured on 4 upright stones. It looked very old, and it was cut all over with strange lines and figures that might be the letters of an unknown language. They gave you a curious feeling when you looked at them. The next thing they saw was a pavilion pitched on one side of the open place. A wonderful pavilion it was, and especially now when the light of the setting sun fell upon it, with sides of what looked like yellow silk and cords of crimson and tent pegs of ivory, and high above it on a pole a banner which bore a red rampant lion fluttering in the breeze which was blowing in their faces from the far-off sea. While they were looking at this, they heard a sound of music on their right, and turning in that direction, they saw what they had come to see. Aslan stood in the center of a crowd of creatures who had grouped themselves round him in the shape of a half-moon. Oh my god, he's here. Hurt pretty bad for sure, but not near one of the most painful things I've experienced. I don't know, man. I've had burns and stuff, but one of the most painful things, like, I've broken bones. I've had surgeries. I've had all kinds of cuts and wounds. But I went one time on a 3.5-hour walk, because I don't know why. I keep trying to see how long I could go on a walk. And I wasn't wearing the proper socks. So I got a huge fucking blister on my heel. Oh my god, this is gonna get gross, by the way, so if you don't want to hear that, like, stop listening now. But it was so fucking huge, and I was, like, limping home. And, like, I could barely get home. I was, like, only a street away from my house, and I was convinced I wasn't gonna be able to get home because even just walking a little bit hurt so fucking bad. And I was like, no, you cannot call someone to come pick you up. That would just be too embarrassing. So I fucking limped all the way home, and then I finally sat down and I took off my shoes and my socks, and it's this huge fucking blister. And of course, because my brain has issues, it's like, all right, we gotta fucking pop it. So I, I fucking destroy it, and then I'm like, all right, I'm gonna put some lidocaine on it so it will numb it. And holy shit, if you've ever used lidocaine, you know that that shit burns for quite a while before it starts numbing. I'm supposed to pop it. I know. That's your damn problem. Listen, okay, I didn't know at the time. I know now, but anyhow, I put lidocaine right on it, and it's like an open wound, basically. Oh my god, it hurt so fucking bad. I almost screamed. Like I shouted and yelped, but I like almost screamed at my full fucking volume. It hurt so bad. Oh my god, it was terrible. Yeah, definitely don't pop it. But for some reason, I did. Um, Continuing on. There were tree women there, and well women, dryads and naiads as they used to be called in our world, with stringed instruments. It was they who had made the music. There were 4 great centaurs. The horse part of them was like a huge English farm horse, and the man part was stern, but stern but beautiful giants. There was also a unicorn and a bull with the head of a man, and a pelican. Bull with the head of a man? That sounds like it would look hilarious. And an eagle and a great dog. Next to Aslan stood 2 lepers, of whom one carried his crown and the other his standard. As for Aslan himself, the beavers and the children didn't know what to do or say when they saw him. People who have not been in Narnia sometimes think that a thing cannot be good and terrible at the same time. If the children had ever thought so, they were cured of it now. For when they tried to look at Aslan's face, they just caught a glimpse of the golden mane and the great, royal, solemn, overwhelming eyes. And then they found they couldn't look at him and went all trembly. Go on, whispered Mr. Beaver. No, whispered Peter. You first. No, sons of Adam before animals, whispered Mr. Beaver back again. Susan, whispered Peter. What about you? Ladies first. No, you're the eldest, whispered Susan. And of course, the longer they went on doing this, the more awkward they felt. Then at last Peter realized that it was up to him. He drew his sword and raised it to the salute and hastily saying to the others, Come on, pull yourselves together. He advanced to the lion and said, We have come, Aslan. Welcome, Peter, son of Adam, said Aslan. Welcome, Susan and Lucy, daughters of Eve. Welcome, he beaver and she beaver. His voice was deep and rich, and somehow took the fidgets out of them. They now felt glad and quiet, and it didn't seem awkward to them to stand and say nothing. But where is the 4th? Asked Aslan. He has tried to betray them and join the White Witch, O Aslan, said Mr. Beaver. And then something made Peter say, It was partly my fault, Aslan. I was angry with him, and I think that helped him to go wrong. Oh my god, it's not your fault. It's just all on Edmund, bro. I think I told you about me going on a long-ass hike, run, half walk, too, like 10 miles or something in 1 to 2 hours, and I legit thought my feet were bleeding, but I was like, nah, I gotta get to 10 miles. Although I found they actually weren't bleeding, I still ended up being, like, really sensitive under my big toes, getting 2 blisters at the back of my heels. Yeah, honestly, bleeding would have, like, if it was like something I was bleeding, it would have probably hurt less, honestly. When it's just blisters on the skin, they hurt so fucking bad. And I don't know why, but I'm the same way. Multiple times I went on insanely long walks, like 3+ hours, and I'd have terrible blisters, and yet still wouldn't learn my lesson. Although I found there weren't, oh wait, oops, I already read that. Yeah, it's true, but it felt sticky. Oh yeah, like the plasma or whatever under my big toe was weirdly sticking to my socks. Yeah, blisters that have that clear fluid. I think it might be plasma or something. I could be wrong. I'm not. I don't know shit about medical things. Okay. Continuing. And Aslan said nothing either to excuse Peter or to blame him, but merely stood looking at him with his great, unchanging eyes. It seemed to all of them that there was nothing to be said. Please, Aslan, said Lucy. Anything be done to save Edmund? All shall be done, said Aslan. It may be harder than you think. And then he was silent again for some time. Up to that moment, Lucy had been thinking how royal and strong and peaceful his face looked. Now it suddenly came to her head that he looked sad as well. But next minute that expression was quite gone. The lion shook his mane and clapped his paws together. Terrible paws, thought Lucy, if he didn't know how to velvet them. Bro does not groom his paws. Bro does not do take care of his nails. Meanwhile, let the feast be prepared. Ladies, take these daughters of Eve to the pavilion and minister to them." When the girls had gone, Aslan laid his paw, and though it was velveted, it was very heavy, on Peter's shoulder and said, "Come, son of Adam, and I will show you a far-off sight of the castle where you are to be king." Something tells me Edmund's not going to be happy about that. And Peter, with his sword still drawn in his hand, went with the lion to the eastern edge of the hilltop. There a beautiful sight met their eyes. The sun was setting behind their backs. That meant that the whole country below them lay in the evening light, forest and hills and valleys, and, winding away like a silver snake, the lower part of the great river. And beyond all this, miles away, was the sea. And beyond the sea the sky, full of clouds which were just turning rose-colored with the reflection of the sunset. Just where the land of Narnia met the sea, in fact, at the mouth of the great river, there was something on a little hill, shining. It was shining because it was a castle, and of course the sunlight was reflected from all the windows which looked towards Peter in the sunset. But to Peter it looked like a great star resting on the seashore. "That, O man," said Aslan, "is Cair Paravel of the 4 thrones, in one of which you must sit as king. I show it to you because you are the firstborn, and you will be high king over all the rest. Shouldn't Lucy be fucking king? Lucy got here first. Why is Lucy not becoming king or queen? Why is Lucy not up at the top?" And once more Peter said nothing, for at that moment a strange noise woke the silence suddenly. It was like a bugle, but richer. "It is your sister's horn," said Aslan to Peter in a low voice, so low as to almost be a purr, if it is not disrespectful to think of a lion purring. And it was like stinging too, so I just thought it was blood for sure. Yeah, no, that's just a blister. I don't know what you mean about plasma. There's like, if you've ever gotten a wound or something like that, if it's bleeding, not only blood comes out, but also like clear stuff, clear fluid as well. And I'm pretty sure it's plasma. What is the clear stuff from a wound? What is the clear fluid from a wound? Seros drainage. Okay, maybe it's not plasma. Oh wait, thin plasma. Oh wait, I think it might be plasma. Is it plasma? I think it is plasma. Just fluid pus? I don't know. I think some of it is plasma. I don't know. Google's giving me mixed results. I know it's not bleeding, but still, I'm pretty sure it's the same stuff. If it's different, I don't know. For a moment, Peter did not understand. Then, when he saw all the other creatures start forward, and heard Aslan say with a wave of his paw, "Back, let the prince win his spurs," he did understand, and set off running as hard as he could to the pavilion. And there he saw a dreadful sight. The naiads and dryads were scattering in every direction. Lucy was running towards him as fast as her short legs would carry her, and her face was as white as paper. Then he saw Susan make a dash for a tree and swing herself up, followed by a huge grey beast. At first Peter thought it was a bear. Then he saw that it looked like an Alsatian, but was far too big to be a dog. Then he realized that it was a wolf standing on its hind legs, with its front paws against the tree trunk, snapping and snarling. All the hair on its back stood up on end. Susan had not been able to get higher than the second big branch. One of her legs hung down so that her foot was only an inch or two above the snapping teeth. Peter wondered why she did not get higher, or at least take a better grip. Then he realized that she was just going to faint, and if she fainted, she would fall off. Well, that's not good. Peter did not feel very brave indeed. He felt he was going to be sick. But that made no difference to what he had to do. He rushed straight up to the monster and aimed a slash of his sword at its side. That stroke never reached the wolf. Quick as lightning, it turned round, its eyes flaming, and its mouth wide open in a howl of anger. If it had not been so angry that it simply had to howl, it would have got him by the throat at once. As it was, though all this happened too quickly for Peter to think at all, he had just time to duck down and plunge his sword as hard as he could between the brute's forelegs and into its heart. Then came a horrible, confused moment, like something in a nightmare. He was tugging and pulling, and the wolf seemed neither alive nor dead, and his bared teeth knocked against his forehead, and everything was blood and heat and hair. A moment later he found that the monster lay dead, and he had drawn his sword out of it and was straightening his back and rubbing the sweat off his face and out of his eyes. He felt tired all over. Then, after a bit, Susan came down the tree. She and Peter felt pretty shaky when they met, and I won't say there wasn't kissing and crying on both sides. But in Narnia, no one thinks any the worse of you for that. Well, obviously, if you're crying and being affectionate right after you were almost eaten by a huge wolf, I don't think anyone should judge you for being worked up about it. Quick, quick, shouted the voice of Aslan. Centaurs, eagles, I see another wolf in the thickets, there, behind you. He has just darted away. After him, all of you. He'll be going to his mistress. Now is your chance to find the witch and rescue the fourth son of Adam. And instantly, with thunder of hooves and beating of wings, a dozen or so of the swiftest creatures disappeared into the gathering darkness. Peter, still out of breath, turned and saw Aslan close at hand. You have forgotten to clean your sword, said Aslan. It was true. Peter blushed when he looked at the bright blade and saw it all smeared with the wolf's hair and blood. He stooped down and wiped it quite clean on the grass, and then wiped it quite dry on his coat. Hand it to me and kneel, son of Adam, said Aslan. And when Peter had done so, he struck him with the flat side of the blade and said, Rise up, Sir Peter Wolfsbane, and, whatever happens, never forget to wipe your sword. And that is the end of chapter 12. Interesting. So there's 5 chapters left. I feel like surely they have to win if there's that many left. I like how just batshit insane this story is. It's like it's an acid trip. Chapter 13. Deep Magic from the Dawn of Time. Now we must get back to Edmund. When he had been made to walk far further than he had ever known that anybody could walk, the witch at last halted in the dark valley all overshadowed with fir trees and yew trees. Edmund simply sank down and lay on his face, doing nothing at all, and not even caring what was going to happen next, provided they would let him lie still. He was too tired even to notice how hungry and thirsty he was. The witch and the dwarf were talking close beside him in low tones. No, said the dwarf, it is no use yet. No use now, O queen. They must have reached the stone table by now. Perhaps the wolf will smell us out and bring us news, said the witch. It cannot be good news if he does, said the dwarf. 4 thrones in Cair Paravel, said the witch. How if only 3 were filled? That would not fulfill the prophecy. What difference would that make now that he is here? Said the dwarf. He did not dare, even now, to mention the name of Aslan to his mistress. He may not stay long, and then we will fall upon the 3 at Cair. Yet it might be better, said the dwarf, to keep this one. Here he kicked Edmund, for bargaining with. Yes, and have him rescued, said the witch scornfully. Then, said the dwarf, we had better do what we have to do at once. I would like to have it done on the stone table itself, said the witch. That is the proper place. That is where it has always been done before. It will be a long time now before the stone table can again be put to its proper use, said the dwarf. True, said the witch, and then, well, I will begin. At that moment, with a rush and a snarl, a wolf rushed up to them. I have seen them. They are all at the stone table, with him. They have killed my captain, Malgrim. I was hidden in the thickets and saw it all. One of the sons of Adam killed him. Fly, fly. No, said the witch. There need be no flying. Go quickly. Summon all our people to meet me here as speedily as they can. Call out the giants and the werewolves and the spirits of those trees who are on our side. Call the ghouls and the bogles and the ogres and the minotaurs. Call the cruels, the hags, the spectres, and the people of the toadstools. We will fight. What? Have I not still my wand? Will not the ranks turn to stone even as they come on? Be off quickly. I have a little thing to finish here while you are away." The great brute bowed its head, turned, and galloped away. "Now," she said, "we have no table. Let me see. We had better put it against the trunk of a tree." What are they going to do to him? Edmund found himself being roughly forced to his feet. Then the dwarf set him with his back against a tree and bound him fast. He saw the witch take off her outer mantle. Her arms were bare underneath. It was oh my god. Her arms were bare underneath it and terribly white. Because they were so very white, he could see them, but he could not see much else. It was so dark in this valley under the dark trees. "Prepare the victim," said the witch, and the dwarf undid Edmund's collar and folded back his shirt at the neck. Then he took Edmund's hair and pulled his head back so that he had to raise his chin. Oh my god, what are they doing to him? "Even though you threw me to the streets like a piece of trash when you timed me out, at least it made me start doing the boxing video today. Always a bright side. Such an optimist you are." After that, Edmund heard a strange noise. Whiz, whiz, whiz. For a moment, he couldn't think what it was. Then he realized it was the sound of a knife being sharpened. At that very moment, he heard loud shouts from every direction, a drumming of hoofs and a beating of wings, a scream from the witch, confusion all round him. And then he found he was being untied. Strong arms were round him, and he heard big, kind voices saying things like, "Let him lie down. Give him some wine. Wine. Drink this. Steady now. You'll be all right in a minute." Then he heard the voices of people who were not talking to him, but to another. They were saying things like, "Who's got the witch? I thought you had her. I didn't see her after I knocked the knife out of her hand. I was after the dwarf. Do you mean to say she's escaped? A chap can't mind everything at once. What's that? Oh, sorry. It's only an old stump." But just at this point, Edmund went off in a dead faint. Presently, the centaurs and unicorns and deer and birds, they were of course the rescue party which Aslan had sent in the last chapter, all set off to go back to the stone table, carrying Edmund with them. Just some strong-ass, well, I guess it was centaurs and unicorns, maybe, never mind. I was just imagining him being carried by all the birds. But if they could have seen what happened in the valley after they had gone, I think they might have been surprised. It was perfectly still, and presently the moon grew bright. If you had been there, you would have seen the moonlight shining on an old tree stump, and a fair-sized boulder. But if you had gone on looking, you would gradually have begun to think there was something odd about both the stump and the boulder. And next you would have thought that the stump did look remarkably like a little fat man crouching on the ground. And if you had watched long enough, you would have seen the stump walk across the boulder, and the boulder sit up and begin talking to the stump. For in reality, the stump and the boulder were simply the witch and the dwarf. For it was part of her magic that she could make things look like what they aren't, and she had the presence of mind to do so at the very moment when the knife was knocked out of her hand. She had kept hold of her wand, so it had been kept safe too. When the other children woke up next morning, they had been sleeping on piles of cushions in the pavilion. First thing they heard from Mrs. Beaver was that their brother had been rescued and brought into camp late last night. Was at that moment with Aslan. As soon as they had breakfasted, they all went out, and there they saw Aslan and Edmund walking together in the dewy grass, apart from the rest of the court. There is no need to tell you, and no one ever heard, what Aslan was saying, but it was a conversation which Edmund never forgot. As the others drew nearer, Aslan turned to meet them, bringing Edmund with him. "Here is your brother," he said, "and there is no need to talk to him about what is past." Edmund shook hands with each of the others and said to each of them in turn, "I'm sorry." And everyone said, "That's all right." I would be fucking pissed. I wouldn't be telling them that's all right. I'd be like, "Fuck you, I'm gonna kill you myself." But that's just me. And then everyone wanted very hard to say something which would make it quite clear that they were all friends with him again. Something ordinary and natural. And of course no one could think of anything in the world to say. Before they had time to feel really awkward, one of the leopards approached Aslan and said, "Sire, there's a messenger from the enemy who craves audience." "Let him approach," said Aslan. The leopard went away, and soon returned leading the witch's dwarf. "What is your message, son of earth?" asked Aslan. "The Queen of Narnia and Empress of the Lone Islands desires a safe conduct to come and speak with you," said the dwarf, "on a matter which is as much to your advantage as to hers." "Queen of Narnia indeed," said Mr. Beaver. "Of all the cheek." "Peace, Beaver," said Aslan. "All names will soon be restored to their proper owners." In the meantime, we will not dispute about them. Tell your mistress, son of earth, that I will grant her safe conduct on condition that she leaves her wand behind her at that great oak." This was agreed to, and 2 lepers went back with the dwarf to see that the conditions were properly carried out. "But supposing she turns the 2 lepers into stone," whispered Lucy to Peter. I think the same idea had occurred to the lepers themselves. At any rate, as they walked off, their fur was all standing up on their backs, and their tails were bristling, like a cat when it sees a strange dog. "You'll be all right," whispered Peter in reply. "We wouldn't send them if it weren't." A few minutes later the witch herself walked out onto the top of the hill and came straight across and stood before Aslan. The 3 children who had not seen her before felt shudders running down their backs at the sight of her face, and there were low growls among all the animals present. Though it was bright sunshine, everyone felt suddenly cold. The only 2 people present who seemed to be quite at their ease were Aslan and the witch herself. It was the oddest thing to see those 2 faces, the golden face and the dead white face, so close together. Not that the witch looked at Aslan exactly in his eyes. Mrs. Beaver particularly noticed this. "You have a traitor there, Aslan," said the witch. Of course everyone present knew that she meant Edmund, but Edmund had got past thinking about himself after all he'd been through, and after the talk he'd had that morning. He just went on looking at Aslan. It didn't seem to matter what the witch said. "Well," said Aslan, "his offense was not against you." "Have you forgotten the deep magic?" asked the witch. "Let us say I have forgotten it," answered Aslan gravely. "Tell us of this deep magic." "Tell you," said the witch, her voice growing suddenly shriller. "Tell you what is written on that very table of stone which stands beside us? Tell you what is written in letters, deep as a spear is long on the firestones on the secret hill? Tell you what is engraved on the scepter of the emperor beyond the sea? You at least know the magic which the emperor put into Narnia at the very beginning. You know that every traitor belongs to me as my lawful prey, and that for every treachery I have a right to kill. There's some weird fucking laws, dude. I would not want to live there. No, thank you. Only place I could think would be worse is maybe Florida." "Oh," said Mr. Beaver, "so that's how you came to imagine yourself a queen, because you were the emperor's hangman. I see." "Peace, Beaver," said Aslan with a very low growl. "And so," continued the witch, "that human creature is mine. His life is forfeit to me. His blood is my property." "Come and take it then," said the bull with the man's head in a great bellowing voice. "Fool," said the witch with a savage smile that was almost a snarl. "Do you really think your master can rob me of my rights by mere force? He knows the deep magic better than that. He knows that unless I have blood as the law says, all Narnia will be overturned and perish in fire and water." "It is very true," said Aslan. "I do not deny it." "Oh, Aslan," whispered Susan in the lion's ear. "Can't we, you won't, will you? Can't we do something about the deep magic? Isn't there something you can work against it?" "Work against the emperor's magic," said Aslan, turning to her with something like a frown on his face. And nobody ever made that suggestion to him again. "You bitches is weird." Edmund was on the other side of Aslan, looking all the time at Aslan's face. He felt a choking feeling and wondered if he ought to say something, but a moment later he felt that he was not expected to do anything except to wait, and do what he was told. "Fall back, all of you," said Aslan, "and I will talk to the witch alone." They all obeyed. It was a terrible time, this, waiting and wondering while the lion and the witch talked earnestly together in low voices. Lucy said, "Oh, Edmund," and began to cry. Peter stood with his back to the others, looking out at the distant sea. The beavers stood holding each other's paws with their heads bowed. "Oh, they're so cute." The centaurs stamped uneasily with their hooves, but everyone became perfectly still in the end, so that you noticed even small sounds like a bumblebee flying past, or the birds in the forest down below them, or the wind rustling the leaves. And still the talk between Aslan and the White Witch went on. At last they heard Aslan's voice. "You can all come back," he said. "I have settled the matter. She has renounced the claim on your brother's blood." And all over the hill there was a noise, as if everyone had been holding their breath and had begun breathing again, and then a murmur of talk. The witch was just turning away with a look of fierce joy on her face when she stopped and said, "But how do I know this promise will be kept?" "How?" as my lion roared. roared Aslan, half rising from his throne, and his great mouth opened wider and wider, and the roar grew louder and louder. And the witch, after staring for a moment with her lips wide apart, picked up her skirts and fairly ran for her life. What? What is happening? Holy rar, I know, right? Hi, Momo, what's up? And that's the end of chapter 13. What? Say hi to chat at least. Read their messages. Respond for me. Who's that? Who's that, Momo? What? You're still reading? Yeah, I'm still reading. That's what. What else would I be doing on the reading stream? Momo. Sorry, I have cat intermission. Dang, you're locked in? Yeah, I am. Momo, do you want to meow into the mic? Momo. Oh, okay, well, you didn't have to do that. She said hello. She said hello. Zoke, what are you doing here? Hello, Maddie. I don't know. Zoke is here to make confusing references, I think. Hey, Momo, move. Move, sweetie. I need to read the words. I need to read the words. Move. Move your butt, please. Thank you. Stay there. Stay there. Just lay right there. Lay right there. Okay. Chapter 14. The Triumph of the Witch. Did Aslan fuck up? Did he really? Well, we're gonna find out, I guess. As soon as the witch had gone, Aslan said, "We must move from this place at once. It will be wanted for other purposes. We shall encamp tonight at the fords of Baruna." Sure, yeah, because I know what that is. Of course, everyone was dying to ask him how he had arranged matters with the witch, but his face was stern, and everyone's ears were still ringing with the sound of his roar, and so nobody dared. After a meal, which was taken in the open air on the hilltop, for the sun had got strong by now and dried the grass, they were busy for a while taking the pavilion down and packing things up. Before 2 o'clock they were on the march and set off in a northeasterly direction, walking at an easy pace, for they had not far to go. During the first part of the journey, Aslan explained to Peter his plan of campaign. "As soon as she has finished her business in these parts," he said, "the witch and her crew will almost certainly fall back to her house and prepare for a sledge. We may or may not be able to cut her off and prevent her from reaching it." He then went on to outline 2 plans of battle, one for fighting the witch and her people in the wood, and another for assaulting her castle. All the time he was advising Peter how to conduct the operations, saying things like, "You must put your centaurs in such and such a place," or "You must post scouts to see that she doesn't do so and so," till at last Peter said, "But you will be there yourself, Aslan." "I can give you no promise of that," answered the lion, and he continued giving Peter his instructions. Okay, so they are going to war. Are we all locked in? Yeah, everyone's locked in. Yeah. Okay. For the last part of the journey, it was Susan and Lucy who saw most of him. He did not talk very much and seemed to them to be sad. It was still afternoon when they came down to a place where the river valley had widened out and the river was broad and shallow. This was the fords of Bruna, and Aslan gave orders to halt on this side of the water. But Peter said, "Wouldn't it be better to camp on the far side, for fear she should try a night attack or anything?" Aslan, who seemed to have been thinking about something else, roused himself with a shake of his magnificent mane and said, "Eh? What's that?" Peter said it all over again. "No," said Aslan in a dull voice, as if it didn't matter. "No, she will not make an attack tonight." And then he sighed deeply. But presently he added, "All the same, it was well thought of. That is how a soldier ought to think. But it doesn't really matter." So they proceeded to pitch their camp. Oh, but Chris would be paid, hey? Chris would be paid. Uh-huh. Okay. I can do it myself. I can. I'm independent. I'm big. I'm grown. I'm so independent. Means I get half your salary or something like that. No. No. Aslan's mood affected everyone that evening. Peter was feeling uncomfortable too at the idea of fighting the battle on his own. The news that Aslan might not be there had come as a great shock to him. Supper that evening was a quiet meal. Everyone felt how different it had been last night or even that morning. It was as if the good times, having just begun, were already drawing to their end. This feeling affected Susan so much that she couldn't get to sleep when she went to bed. And after she had lain counting sheep and turning over and over, she heard Lucy give a long sigh and turn over just beside her in the darkness. "Can't you get to sleep either?" said Susan. "No," said Lucy. "I thought you were asleep." "I say, Susan!" "What?" "I have a most horrible feeling, as if something were hanging over us." "Have you? Because, as a matter of fact, so have I." "Something about Aslan," said Lucy. "Either some dreadful thing is going to happen to him, or something dreadful that he's going to do." "There's been something wrong with him all afternoon," said Susan. "Lucy, what was that he said about not being with us at the battle? You don't think he could be stealing away and leaving us tonight, do you?" "Where is he now?" said Lucy. "Is he here in the pavilion?" "I don't think so." "Susan, let's go outside and have a look around. We might see him." "All right, let's," said Susan. "We might just as well be doing that as lying awake here." "Martha's rich. She once sent me $50 for lunch. Fed my whole village for a month." Yeah, I'm so generous and so rich. "Mom, why don't you pay for my lunch too?" "Well, because you've never said to me, 'Hey, can I borrow some money for my lunch?'" Zoke was asking. Not me specifically, but was just asking. And so I was like, "I got you. I got you, homie." Uh, Very quietly, the two girls groped their way among the other sleepers and crept out of the tent. Very weird use of the word groped, but all right. The moonlight was bright and everything was quite still, except for the noise of the river chattering over the stones. Then Susan suddenly caught Lucy's arm and said, "Look!" On the far side of the camping ground, just where the trees began, they saw the lion slowly walking away from them into the wood. Without a word, they both followed him. Oh boy. "You would really give me 50 for lunch? If you really needed it. Like, if you literally were starving, yeah." "I don't know if I give you 50, though, because I don't have as much money as I did at the time when I gave that. I'm always starving, but I mean, like, you literally can't afford to eat, you know?" He led them up to the steep slope out of the river valley and then slightly to the right, apparently by the same route which they had used that afternoon in coming from the hill of the stone table. On and on he led them, into dark shadows and out into pale moonlight, getting their feet wet with the heavy dew. He looked somehow different from the Aslan they knew. His tail and his head hung low, and he walked slowly as if he were very, very tired. Then, when they were crossing a wide open place where there was no shadows for him to hide in, he stopped and looked round. It is no good trying to run away, so they came towards him. When they were closer, he said, "Oh, children, children, why are you following me?" "We couldn't sleep," said Lucy, and then felt sure that she need say no more, and then that knew... Oh, I can't repeat when you're there. She said no more, and then Aslan knew all they had been thinking. "Please, may we come with you, wherever you're going?" asked Susan. "Well," said Aslan, and seemed to be thinking. Then he said, "I should be glad of company tonight. Yes, you may come, if you will promise to stop when I tell you, and after that leave me to go on alone." "Oh, thank you, and we will," said the two girls. Forward they went again, and one of the girls walked on each side of the lion. How slowly he walked, and his great royal head drooped so that his nose nearly touched the grass. Presently he stumbled and gave a low moan. Instead of rain, can you play some ASMR? I'm not just gonna put on someone else's ASMR. I'm not gonna just open some fucking YouTube video and start... blasting their ASMR. Oh man, Zoke wants me to put on ASMR. As if I just like have a folder of my own ASMR just chilling around or something. Aslan, dear Aslan, said Lucy. What is wrong? Can't you tell us? Are you dear Aslan? Asked Susan. No, said Aslan. I am sad and lonely. Lay your hands on my mane so I can feel you are there, and let us walk like that. Rose tweaking. And so the girls did what they would never have dared to do without his permission, but what they had longed to do ever since they first saw him, buried their cold hands in the beautiful sea of fur and stroked it, and so doing, walked with him. Presently they saw that they were going with him up the slope and on the hill of the stone table. They went up at the side where the trees came furthest up, and when they got to the last tree, it was one that had some bushes about it, Aslan stopped and said, "Oh, children, children, here you must stop. Whatever happens, do not let yourselves be seen. Farewell." And both the girls cried bitterly, though they hardly knew why, and clung to the lion and kissed his mane and his nose and his paws and his great sad eyes. I want to kiss a lion's mane. Do you not? This is ASMR, sort of. I saw a really funny ASMR video on TikTok. Oh, please do tell more. Then he turned from them and walked out onto the top of the hill. And Lucy and Susan, crouching in the bushes, looked after him, and this is what they saw. A great crowd of people were standing all around the stone table, and though the moon was shining, many of them carried torches which burned with evil-looking red flames and black smoke. But such people, ogres with monstrous teeth, and wolves and bull-headed men, spirits of evil trees and poisonous plants, and other creatures whom I won't describe, because if I did, the grown-ups would probably not let you read this book. Damn, okay. Cruels and hags and incubuses, wraiths, horrors, efreets, sprites, orkneys, wooshes, and ettins. In fact, here were all those who were on the witch's side, and whom the wolf had summoned at her command. And right in the middle, standing by the table, was the witch herself. A howl and a gibber of dismay went up from the creatures when they first saw the great lion pacing towards them, and for a moment even the witch seemed to be struck with fear. Then she recovered herself and gave a wild, fierce laugh. "The fool!" she cried. "The fool has come. Blind him fast. I have a prediction. I kind of feel like he's sacrificing himself, and the witch is like, if I can have you, then I'll leave everyone else alone." That's kind of my guess. Lucy and Susan held their breaths waiting for Aslan's roar and his spring upon his enemies, but it never came. 4 hags, grinning and leering, yet also, at first, hanging back and half afraid of what they had to do, had approached him. "Blind him, I say," repeated the white witch, and the hags made a dart at him and shrieked with triumph when they found that he had made no resistance at all. Then others, evil dwarfs and apes. It's like, yes, demons and incubuses and dwarves and ogres and monkeys, evil monkeys, rushed in to help them. And between them, they rolled the huge lion over on his back and tied all his 4 paws together, shouting and cheering as if they had done something brave, though, had the lion chosen, one of those paws could have been the death of them all. But he made no noise, even when the enemies, straining and tugging, pulled the cords so tight that they cut into his flesh. They then began to drag him towards the stone table. Bro, this is getting dark. Fuck, I can't really remember. I don't know, it was 2 people, but it wasn't actual ASMR. I love joke or insane ASMR. I find it very funny as well. Evil ones, ooh. Evil monkeys. You said what? Cancel? Oh my god, don't even. Family Guy, evil monkey. I've never watched Family Guy, but I feel like if there's ever gonna be an evil monkey plot in a show, it would be Family Guy. "Stop," said the witch. "Let him first be shaved." What the fuck? What is wrong with this bitch? Another roar of mean laughter went up from her followers as an ogre with a pair of shears came forward and squatted down by Aslan's head. Snip, 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 and the shears in masses of curling gold began to fall to the ground. Then the ogre stood back, and the children, watching from their hiding place, could see the face of Aslan looking all small and different without his mane, The enemies also saw the difference. What the fuck? They're just humiliating him. ASMR, please? What, what do you mean? What do you want me to do? What do you want me to do? I need to refill my water as well, so I'll be right back. In the meantime, please tell me what the fuck you mean by ASMR, please. 1 second. And this is already relaxing. I'm glad you think so. That was the goal. Zoke, stop harassing Doom. Stop asking about the money jiggling or folding. Please. You're embarrassing me, Zoke. I'm just confused. Don't worry, me too. Here I am. Why, he's only a great cat after all, cried one. Is that what we were afraid of? Said another. And they surged round Aslan, jeering at him, saying things like, Puss, puss, poor pussy. Push, push, poor pussy. And how many mice have you caught today, cat? And would you like a saucer of milk, pussums? Wow, they fucking roasted him. They just fucking roasted him, dude. Puss, poor pussy, yes. Don't forget, would you like a saucer of milk, pussums? Are you sure you got the right book? I'm pretty sure. Hello, Lens. Interesting. Oh, how can they? Said Lucy, tears streaming down her cheeks. The brutes, the brutes. For now that the first shock was over, the shorn face of Aslan looked to her braver, and more beautiful and more patient than ever. Muzzle him, said the witch. And even now, as they worked about his face, putting on the muzzle, one bite from his jaws would have cost 2 or 3 of them their hands. But he never moved, and this seemed to enrage all that rabble. Everyone was at him now. Those who had been afraid to come near him even after he was bound began to find their courage. For a few minutes the 2 girls could not even see him. So thickly was he surrounded by the whole crowd of creatures kicking him, hitting him, spitting on him, jeering at him. At last the rabble had had enough of this. They began to drag the bound and muscled lion to the stone table, some pulling and some pushing. He was so huge that even when they got him there, it took all their efforts to hoist him onto the surface of it. Then there was more tying and tightening of cords. The cowards, sobbed Susan. Are they still afraid of him even now? When once Aslan had been tied, and tied so that he was really a mass of cords, on the flat stone, a hush fell on the crowd. 4 hags, holding 4 torches, stood at the corners of the table. The witch bared her arms as she had bared them the previous night when it had been Edmund instead of Aslan. Then she began to whet her knife. It looked to the children, when the gleam of the torchlight fell on it, as if the knife were made of stone, not of steel, and it was of a strange and evil shape. They're just gonna fucking seppuku him or something? That's a method of suicide. My bad. As last she drew near, she stood by Aslan's head. Her face was working and twitching with passion, but he looked up at the sky, still quiet, neither angry nor afraid, but a little sad. Then, just before she gave the blow, she stooped down and said in a quivering voice, And now, who has won? Fool, did you think that by all this you would save the human traitor? I will kill you instead of him, as our pact was, and so the deep magic will be appeased. But when you are dead, what will prevent me from killing him as well? And who will take him out of my hand then? Understand that you've given me Narnia forever. You have lost your own life, and you have not saved his. In that knowledge, despair and die. What the fuck? The children did not see the actual moment of the killing. They couldn't bear to look and had covered their eyes. End of chapter 14. What the fuck? What? That's so dark. How old is this book? Hold on. It was made, it was published in 1950. So, there you go. Oh, maybe I fucking found it. It wasn't actually really ASMR, but it was like the voice acting, but jokingly. Oh, I see. Wow, biology class really upgraded from dissecting frogs. Yeah, they're fucking ritualistically sacrificing a huge lion. They're like shaving him for fun. Alright, chapter 15. Okay. Is he really just. He's just dead? All this hype for him, and he's just here, and he's been instantly killed and hasn't done jack shit? While the two girls still crouched in the bushes with their hands over their faces, they heard the voice of the witch calling out, "Now, follow me all, and we will set about what remains of this war. It will not take us long to crush the human vermin and the traitors now that the great pool, the great cat, lies dead." Well, it's like a real cat, so true. You should check out the movies when you're done with the book. I have watched the movies, but it was when I was like, it's like a long, long time ago, so I barely remember them. I just remember really liking them. I would love to watch them again if I could figure out how. I guess maybe if I just searched around, I could probably find them. Barely remember them too? Yeah, it's like vague. But I do remember some cool shit. It's just like random bits. At this moment, the children, and a noise of skirling pipes and shrill horns blowing, the whole of that vile rabble came sweeping off the hilltop and down the slope right past their hiding place. They felt the spectres go by them like a cold wind, and they felt the ground shake beneath them under the galloping feet of the minotaurs, and overhead there went a flurry of foul wings and a blackness of vultures and giant bats. At any other time they would have trembled with fear, but now the sadness and shame and horror of Aslan's death so filled their minds that they hardly thought of it. As soon as the wood was silent again, Susan and Lucy crept out onto the open hilltop. The moon was getting low, and thin clouds were passing across her, but still they could see the shape of the lion lying dead in his bonds. And down they both knelt in the wet grass and kissed his cold face and stroked his beautiful fur, what was left of it. This is so sad and morbid, and cried till they could cry no more. And then they looked at each other and held each other's hands for mere loneliness and cried again, and then again were silent. At last Lucy said, "I can't bear to look at that horrible muzzle. I wonder could we take it off." So they tried. After a lot of working at it, for their fingers were cold, and it was now the darkest part of the night, they succeeded. And when they saw his face without, they burst out crying again, and kissed it and fondled it, and wiped away the blood and the foam as well as they could. It was all more lonely and hopeless and horrid than I know how to describe. "I wonder could we untie him as well," said Susan presently. But the enemies, out of pure spitefulness, had drawn the cords so tight that the girls could make nothing of the knots. I hope no one who reads this book has been quite as miserable as Susan and Lucy were that night. But if you have been, if you've been up all night and cried till you have no more tears left in you, you will know that there comes in the end a sort of quietness. You feel as if nothing was ever going to happen again. At any rate, that was how it felt to these two. Hours and hours seemed to go by in this dead calm, and they hardly noticed that they were getting colder and colder. But at last Lucy noticed two other things. One was that the sky on the east side of the hill was a little less dark than it had been an hour ago. The other was some tiny movement going on in the grass at her feet. At first she took no interest in this. What did it matter? Nothing mattered now. But at last she saw that whatever it was had begun to move up the upright stones of the stone table, and now whatever they were moving about on Aslan's body. She peered closer. They were little gray things. "Ugh," said Susan from the other side of the table. "How beastly! These are horrid little mice crawling over him. Go away, you little beasts. And she raised her hand to frighten them away. He's getting swarmed by mouse? I remember when the kids gets a bow. Yeah, I think it's Susan who has the bow. Would you like to see the ASMR/VA video I found pretty funny? Yes, please. So, hi, Jelly. Yes, hello, Jelly. How are you doing? Hello. The first two movies are on YouTube, Amazon Prime, and Disney Plus. There is only on Amazon Prime and YouTube. I see. I will have to consider investing. Do I send the link in chat? Yeah, you should be able to. I'm pretty sure links are on. Wait, said Lucy, who had been looking at them more closely still. Can't you see what they're doing? Both girls bent down and stared. I do believe, said Susan, but how queer. They're nibbling away at the cords. I hate it when those queers nibble at my cords. Fucking queers always nibbling on them cords. Oh, wait, this is what the left wants. This is the left's agenda. Oh my god. That's what I thought, said Lucy. I think they're friendly mice. Poor little things. They don't realize he's dead. They think it'll do some good untying him. It was definitely lighter by now. Each of the girls noticed for the first time the white face of the other. They could see the mice nibbling away, dozens and dozens, even hundreds of little field mice. And at last, one by one, the girls were all gnawed through. Good job, queers. Damn liberals, so true. Gosh dang gay sharks living in the dang ocean and internet cables. So true. The sky in the east was whitish by now, and the stars were getting fainter. All except one very big one low down on the eastern horizon. They felt colder than they had been all night. The mice crept away again. The girls cleared away the remains of the gnawed ropes. Aslan looked more like himself without them. Every moment his dead face looked nobler, as the light grew and they could see it better. In the wood behind them a bird gave a chuckling sound. It had been so still for hours and hours that it startled them. Then another bird answered it. Soon there were birds singing all over the place. It is quite definitely early morning by now, not late night. I am so cold, said Lucy. So am I, said Susan. Let's walk about a bit. They walked to the eastern edge of the hill and looked down. The one big star had almost disappeared. The country all looked dark gray, but beyond, at the very end of the world, the sea showed pale. The sky began to turn red. They walked to and fro more times than they could count between the dead Aslan and the eastern ridge, trying to keep warm, and oh, how tired their legs felt. Then at last, as they stood for a moment looking out towards the sea and Cair Paravel, which they could now just make out, the red turned to gold along the line where the sea and the sky met. Very slowly up came the edge of the sun. At that moment they heard from behind them a loud noise, a great cracking, deafening noise, as if a giant had broken a giant's plate. What's that? Said Lucy, clutching Susan's arm. I feel afraid to turn around, said Susan. Something awful is happening. They're doing something worse to him, said Lucy. Come on. And she turned, pulling Susan around with her. Oh my god, they're gonna mutilate his corpse? You can see my link though. There's the link. I'll open it now. Hopefully it's not too loud.
Realms is a powerful 3D map making application.
Master
with just a few
Realms.
strokes.
Hey babe, did you get my food?
Yeah, I did.
Aw, you're so sweet for that. Anyways, let's eat. What the fuck is this? Why the fuck did you get the Big Mac instead of the nugget?
I'm sorry. I didn't mean.
Shut up! I own you!
I
You got no say in this.
no. I'm sick of this. I'm getting tired of getting treated this way.
What are you talking about? Your pathetic ass thinks you can.
Shut up already!
What am I
So sick and tired of
listening
this.
to, Chris?
No.
Wait, no, I'm sorry. Good boy, and.
Shut up already. I don't care anymore. This is my life. This is my pathway. No, it doesn't matter. Kicking swords!
That, I think, is pure brain rot, and I regret clicking on the link. Never again. Never again. Never again. We're gonna pretend that didn't happen, and we're gonna go back to the book. Alright, everyone? This reminds me of that ASMR of a girlfriend walking her boyfriend through a construction zone and he gets crushed by a steel beam. Wow, people are so creative. The rising of the sun had made everything look so different. All colors and shadows were changed that for a moment they didn't see the important thing. Then they did. The stone table was broken into two pieces by a giant crack that ran down it from end to end, and there was no Aslan. "Oh, oh, oh!" cried the two girls, rushing back to the table. "Oh, it's too bad," sobbed Lucy. "They might have left the body alone." "Who's done it?" cried Susan. "What does it mean? Is it magic?" "Yes," said a great voice behind their backs. "It is more magic." They looked around. There, shining in the sunrise, larger than they had seen him before, shaking his mane, for it had apparently grown again, stood Aslan himself. "Oh, bro is just back? He's just back? Okay." "Oh, Aslan," cried both the children, staring up at him, almost as much frightened as they were glad. "Are you dead then, dear Aslan?" said Lucy. "Not now," said Aslan. "You're not a—" asked Susan in a shaky voice. She couldn't bring herself to say the word ghost. Even if he was, who cares? Aslan stooped his golden head and licked her forehead. The warmth of his breath and a rich sort of smell that seemed to hang about his hair came all over her. "Do I look it?" he said. "Oh, you're real, oh Aslan!" cried Lucy, and both girls flung themselves upon him and covered him with kisses. "But what does it mean?" asked Susan when they were somewhat calmer. "It means," said Aslan, "that though the witch knew the deep magic, there is a magic deeper still, which she did not know. Her knowledge goes back only to the dawn of time. But if she could have looked a little further back, into the stillness and the darkness before time dawned, she would have read there is a different incantation. She would have known that when a willing victim who had committed no treachery was killed in a traitor's stead, the table would crack and death itself would start working backwards. And now—" "Oh, yes, now?" said Lucy, jumping up and clapping her hands. "Oh, children," said the lion, "I feel my strength coming back to me. Oh, children, catch me if you can." He stood for a second, his eyes very bright, his limbs quivering, lashing himself with his tail. Then he made a leap high over their heads and landed on the other side of the table. Laughing, though she didn't know why, Lucy scrambled over it to reach him. Aslan leaped again. A mad chase began. Round and round the hilltop he led them now hopelessly out of their reach. Hold on. Why are they just playing games when their brothers' lives are on the line? What the fuck, bro? An instant respawn? Exactly. We were all like sad for absolutely nothing. He came back immediately. Ghost. I just thought it was funny because it's supposed to be ASMR and I was not expecting that at all. I feel like if you just came across it, it would be more funny, but when you already know it's like supposed to be humorous and you open it and it's just like whatever the hell they were doing back and forth, it's not as funny. Just feels like people turned on the recording and just improv and they're terrible at improv. That's what it seems like. No offense. What was I? Now letting them almost catch his tail, now diving between them, now tossing them in the air with his huge and beautifully velveted paws and catching them again, and now stopping unexpectedly so that all three of them rolled over together in a happy, laughing heap of fur and arms and legs. It was such a romp as no one has ever had except in Narnia, and whether it was more like playing with a thunderstorm or playing with a kitten, Lucy could never make up her mind. And the funny thing was that when all three finally lay together panting in the sun, the girls no longer felt in the least tired or hungry or thirsty. "And now," said Aslan presently, "to business. I feel I'm going to roar. You had better put your fingers in your ears." And they did. And Aslan stood up, and when he opened his mouth to roar, his face became so terrible that they did not dare to look at it. And they saw all the trees in front of him bend before the blast of his roaring, as grass bends in a meadow before the wind. Then he said, "We have a long journey to go. You must ride on me." Bro, I want to ride on a giant magical lion. And he crouched down, and the children climbed onto his warm golden back. And Susan sat first, holding on tightly to his mane, and Lucy sat holding on tightly to Susan. With a great heave, he rose underneath them and then shot off, faster than any horse could go, downhill and into the thick of the forest. That ride was perhaps the most wonderful thing that had happened to them in Narnia. Have you ever had a gallop on a horse? Think of that, and then take away the heavy noise of the hooves and the jingle of the bits, and imagine instead the almost noiseless padding of the great paws. Then imagine instead of the black or gray or chestnut back of the horse, the soft roughness of golden fur, and the mane flying back in the wind. And then imagine you are going about twice as fast as the fastest racehorse. This is a mount that doesn't need to be guided and never grows tired. He rushes on and on, never missing his footing, never hesitating, threading his way with perfect skill between tree trunks, jumping over bush and briar and the smaller streams. He'd be good at Minecraft speedruns. Wading the larger, swimming the largest of all. And you are riding not on a road, nor in a park, nor even on the downs, but right across Narnia, in spring, down solemn avenues of beech and across sunny glades of oak, through wild orchids of snow-white cherry trees, past roaring waterfalls and mossy rocks and echoing caverns, up windy slopes, alight with gorse bushes, and across the shoulders of heathery mountains and along giddy ridges, and down, down, down again, into wild valleys and out into acres of blue flowers. It sounds like this should be heaven, minus all the evil witch and whatnot. You're not gonna lie, I almost didn't sound like it felt less funny the second time I watched it. I see. I'm just saying, from what little of the movies I remember, it feels like they're better than the book. I'm not sure. I don't really read, so I don't think I can say much for book versus movie discourse. But I'm enjoying both of them. I thought you were going to say something completely different. What? I don't know what I said. But could he build a big-ass bridge? Probably. Maybe. I don't know. Could he? The book praises the lion so much it feels like a bad anime where they make the main character overpowered and has no personality. Yeah, I guess so. I think in my mind it's just he's a fucking magical lion and he's just doing magical lion things and I'm just here to see what happens. I don't know. Alright, I'm done being bored. I'm a dip. Later, squad. Alright, see ya, Zoke. Thank you for stopping by. Thank you, thank you. It was nearly midday when they found themselves looking down a steep hillside at a castle. A little toy castle it looked from where they stood, which seemed to be all pointed towers. But the lion was rushing down at such a speed that it grew larger every moment, and before they had time to even ask themselves what it was, they were already on level with it. And now it no longer looked like a toy castle, but rose frowning in front of them. No face looked over the battlements, and the gates were fast shut. And Aslan, not at all slacking his pace, rushed straight as a bullet towards it. "The witch is home," he cried. "Now, children, hold tight." Next moment the whole world seemed to turn upside down, and the children felt as if they had left their insides behind them, for the lion had gathered himself together for a greater leap than any he had yet made, and jumped, or you may call it flying rather than jumping, right over the castle wall. The two girls, breathless but unhurt, found themselves tumbling off his back in the middle of a wide stone courtyard full of statues. And that's the end of chapter 15. How many chapters are left? 16 and 17. There's only 2 left. So we're going to finish up right here. We're on page 95 out of 106. So we're almost done. We're almost done. Pretty good finish a book in 2 streams. Pretty damn fast, I'd say. Alright, chapter 16. What happened about the statues? "What an extraordinary place," cried Lucy. "All those stone animals, and people too. It's like a museum." "Those are corpses, Lucy. Don't celebrate too much. Chill." "Hush," said Susan. "Aslan's doing something." He was indeed. He had bounded up to the stone lion and breathed on him. And without waiting a moment he whisked round, almost as if he had been a cat chasing its tail, and breathed also on the stone dwarf, which, as you remember, was standing a few feet from the lion with his back to it. Then he pounced on a tall stone dryad which stood beyond the dwarf, turned rapidly aside to deal with a stone rabbit on his right, and rushed on to 2 centaurs. But at that moment Lucy said, "Oh, Susan, look at the lion. I expect you've seen someone put a lighted match to a bit of newspaper which is propped up in a grate against an unlit fire. For a second, nothing seemed to have happened, and then you notice a tiny streak of flame creeping along the edge of the newspaper. It was like that now. For a second, after Aslan had breathed upon him, the stone lion looked just the same. Then a tiny streak of gold began to run along his white marble back, and then it spread. Then the color seemed to lick all over him as the flame licks all over the bit of paper. Then, while his hindquarters was still obviously stone, the lion shook his mane, and all the heavy stone folds rippling into living hair. Then he opened a great red mouth, warm and living, and gave a prodigious yawn. And now his hind legs had come to life. He lifted one of them and scratched himself. He comes alive and he yawns and gives himself a scratch. Definitely a cat. Then, having caught sight of Aslan, he went bounding after him and frisking round him, whimpering with delight and jumping up to lick his face. Is it his son or something? Of course the children's eyes turned to follow the lion, but the sight they saw was so wonderful that they soon forgot about him. Everywhere the statues were coming to life. The courtyard looked no longer like a museum. It looked more like a zoo. Creatures were running after Aslan and dancing round him till he was almost hidden in the crowd. Instead of all that deadly white, the courtyard was now a blaze of colors. Glossy chestnut sides of centaurs, indigo horns of unicorns, dazzling plumage of birds, ruddy brown of foxes, dogs and satyrs, yellow stockings and crimson hoods of dwarfs, and the birch girls in silver, and the beech girls in fresh transparent green. I don't know what they mean by beech girls and birch girls. And the larch girls in green so bright that it was almost yellow. And instead of the deadly silence, the whole place rang with the sound of happy roarings, brayings, yelpings, barkings, squealings, cooings, neighings, stampings, shouts, hurrahs, songs, and laughter. It's 5:30 in the morning, so I'm going to be heading off for now. Thanks for streaming. I had a really nice and relaxing time. Thank you. I'm really glad you did. I hope you have a great rest of your day, or if you're going to bed, have a good sleep. Have a good day. Enjoy the rest of your day. Thank you. I will. Thank you. Thank you so much for coming. I'm glad you found it relaxing. Much love. Appreciate it. Oh, said Susan, in a different tone. Look, I wonder. I mean, is it safe? Lucy looked and saw that Aslan had just breathed on the feet of the stone giant. It's all right, shouted Aslan joyously. Once the feet are put right, all the rest of them will follow. That wasn't exactly what I meant, whispered Susan to Lucy, but it was too late to do anything about it now, even if Aslan would have listened to her. The change was already creeping up the giant's legs. Now he was moving his feet. A moment later, he lifted his club off his shoulder, rubbed his eyes, and said, Bless me, I must have been asleep. Now, where's that dratted little witch that was running about on the ground? Somewhere just by my feet it was. When everyone had shouted up to him to explain what had really happened, and when the giant had put his hand to his ear and got them to repeat it all again so that at last he understood, then he bowed down till his head was no further off than the top of a haystack and touched his cap repeatedly to Aslan, beaming all over his honest ugly face. You're calling him ugly? What the fuck? Giants of any sort are now so rare in England, and so few giants are good-tempered that 10 to 1 you have never seen a giant when his face is beaming. It's a sight well worth looking at. You have the gall to call him ugly? Bro, that's fucked up. Now for inside of this house, said Aslan. Look alive, everyone. Upstairs and downstairs in my lady's chamber. Leave no corner unsearched. You never know where some poor prisoner may be concealed. And into the interior they all rushed, and for several minutes the whole of that dark, horrible, fusty old castle echoed with the opening of windows and with everyone's voices crying out at once. Don't forget the dungeons. Give us a hand with this door. Here's another little winding stair. Oh, I say, here's a poor kangaroo. Call Aslan. Phew, how it smells in here. Look out for trapdoors. Up here. There are a whole lot more on the landing. But the best of all is when Lucy came rushing upstairs shouting out, Aslan, Aslan, I found Mr. Tumnus. Oh, do come quick. A moment later, Lucy and the little fawn were holding each other by both hands and dancing around and around for joy. Ah, Mr. Tumnus. The little chap was none the worse for having been a snatch Jew and was, of course, very interested in all she had to tell him. But at last the ransacking of the witch's fortress was ended. The whole castle stood empty with every door and window open, and the light and the sweet spring air flooding into all the dark and evil places which needed them so badly. The whole crowd of liberated statues surged back into the courtyard. It was then that someone, Tumnus, I think, first said. But how are we going to get out? For Aslan had got in by a jump, and the gates were still locked. That'll be all right, said Aslan, and then rising on his hind legs, he bawled up at the giant. Hi, you up there, he roared. What's your name? Giant Rumblebuffin. What a name! If it please your honor, said the giant, once more touching his cap. Well then, Giant Rumblebuffin, said Aslan, just let us out of this, will you? Certainly, your honor. It will be a pleasure, said Giant Rumblebuffin. Stand well away from the gates, all of you little uns. Then he strode to the gate himself, and bang, bang, bang went his huge club. The grates creaked at the first blow, cracked at the second, and shivered at the third. Then he tackled the towers on each side of them, and after a few minutes of crashing and thudding, both the towers and a good bit of the wall on each side went thundering down in a mass of hopeless rubble. When the dust cleared, it was odd, standing in that dry, grim, stony yard, to see through the gap all the grass and waving trees and sparkling streams of the forest, and the blue hills beyond that, and beyond them the sky. Gotta head to the bakery to get some rumble muffins. So true. I love making rumble muffins. They're so tasty. Blowed if I ain't all in a muck sweat. The fuck does that mean? Said the giant, puffing like the largest railway engine. Comes of being out of condition, I suppose. Neither of you young ladies has such a thing as a pocket handkerchief about you. He said giant. How is that going to be any use to him? It's going to go in his nostril. Yes, I have, said Lucy, standing on tiptoes and holding her handkerchief up as far as she could reach. Thank you, Missy, said Giant Rumblebuffin, stooping down. Next moment, Lucy got a rather fright, for she found herself caught up in mid-air between the giant's finger and thumb. Just as she was getting near his face, he suddenly started and then put her gently back on the ground, muttering, Bless me, I've picked up the little girl instead. I beg your pardon, Missy. I thought you was the handkerchief. No, no, said Lucy, laughing. Here it is. This time he managed to get it, but it was only about the same size to him that a saccharine tablet would be to you. So that when she saw him solemnly rubbing it to and fro across his great red face, she said, I'm afraid it's not much use to you, Mr. Rumblebuffin. Not at all, said the giant politely. Never met a nicer handkerchief. So fine, so handy. So, I don't know how to describe it. What a nice giant he is, said Lucy to Mr. Tumnus. Oh yes, replied the fawn. All the Buffins always were. One of the most respected of all the giant families in Narnia. Not very clever, perhaps. I never knew a giant that was. But an old family. With traditions, you know. If he had been the other sort, she'd have never turned him into stone. At this point, Aslan clapped his paws together and called for silence. Our day's work is not yet over, he said, and if the witch is to be finally defeated before bedtime, we must find the battle at once. And join in, I hope, sir, added the largest of centaurs. Of course, said Aslan. And now, those who can't keep up, that is, children, dwarfs, and small animals, must ride on the backs of those who can. That is, lions, centaurs, unicorns, horses, giants, and eagles. Those who are good with their noses must come in front with us lions to smell out where the battle is. Look lively and sort yourselves. All right, it's finally time for war. And with a great deal of bustle and cheering they did. The most pleased of the lot was the other lion, who kept running about everywhere, pretending to be very busy, but really in order to say to everyone he met, Did you hear what he said? Us lions. That means him and me. Us lions. That's what I like about Aslan. No side, no standoffishness. Us lions. That meant him and me. Bro was parasocial. At least, he went on saying this till Aslan had loaded him up with 3 dwarfs, 1 dryad, and 2 rabbits, and a hedgehog. That steadied him a bit. When all were ready, it was a big sheepdog who actually helped Aslan in getting most of them sorted into their proper order. They set out through the gap in the castle wall. At first the lions and dogs went nosing about in all directions, but then suddenly one great hound picked up the scent and gave a bay. There was no time lost after that. Soon all the dogs and lions and wolves and other hunting animals were going at full speed with their noses to the ground, and all the others, streaked out for about half a mile behind them, were following as fast as they could. Their noise was like an English fox hunt, only better, because every now and then with the music of the hounds was mixed the roar of the other lion, and sometimes the far deeper and more awful roar of Aslan himself. Faster and faster they went, as the scent became easier and easier to follow. And then, Just as they came to the last curve in a narrow winding valley, Lucy heard above all these noises another noise, a different one, which gave her a queer feeling inside. The noises are making me gay. It was a noise of shouts and shrieks and of the clashing of metal against metal. Then they came out of the narrow valley, and at once she saw the reason. There stood Peter and Edmund and all the rest of Aslan's army fighting desperately against the crowd of horrible creatures whom she had seen last night. Only now, in the daylight, they looked even stranger and more evil and more deformed. What? It's the 5... Oh, it's the 5G. It's the 5G. You think they had 5G with 1950? There also seemed to be far more of them. Peter's army, which had their backs to her, looked terribly few, and there were statues dotted all over the battlefield, so apparently the witch had been using her wand. She did not seem to be using it now. She was fighting with her stone knife. It was Peter she was fighting, both of them going at it so hard that Lucy could barely make out what was happening. She only saw the stone knife and Peter's sword flashing so quickly that they looked like 3 knives and 3 swords. That pair were in the center. On each side of the line stretched out. Horrible things were happening wherever she looked. "Off my back, children!" shouted Aslan, and they both tumbled off. Then with a roar that shook all Narnia from the western lamppost to the shores of the eastern sea, the great beast flung himself upon the White Witch. Lucy saw her face lifted towards him for 1 second with an expression of terror and amazement. Then lion and witch had rolled over together, but with the witch underneath. And at the same moment all warlike creatures whom Aslan had led from the witch's house rushed madly on the enemy lines. Dwarfs with their battle axes, dogs with teeth, the giant with his club, and his feet also crushed dozens of the foe. Unicorns with their horns, centaurs with their swords and hooves, and Peter's tired army cheered, and the newcomers roared, and the enemy squealed and gibbered till the wood re-echoed with the din of that onset. I don't know what the fuck that means, but that is the end of chapter 16. We're on page 101 out of 106. This is the last chapter, chapter 17. I hope the witch is killed in like an insanely brutal way. I think that would be funny. The battle was all over a few minutes after their arrival. Most of the enemy had been killed in the first charge of Aslan and his companions, and when those who were still living saw that the witch was dead, they either gave themselves up or took to flight. The next thing that Lucy knew was that Peter and Aslan were shaking hands. It was strange to her to see Peter looking as he looked now. His face was so pale and stern, and he seemed so much older. I still got literally no clue what has happened. Crazy world, witch evil, witch pissed off, stupid boy betray his family. They get him back after stupid boy realizes, damn, turns out she is evil. Magic lion appears, dies and comes back to life, kills witch. It was all Edmund's doing, Aslan, Peter was saying. We'd have been beaten if it hadn't been for him. The witch was turning our troops into stone right and left, but nothing would stop him. He fought his way through 3 ogres to where she was just turning one of your leopards into a statue. And when he reached her, he had sense to bring his sword smashing down on her wand instead of trying to go for her directly and simply getting made a statue himself for his pains. That was the mistake all the rest were making. Once her wand was broken, we began to have some chance. If we hadn't lost so many already. He was terribly wounded. We must go and see him. They found Edmund in charge of Mrs. Beaver a little way back from the fighting line. He was covered with blood, his mouth was open, and his face a nasty green color. "Quick, Lucy," said Aslan. "I hope Edmund dies, bro. I'm not going to be sad at all." "Lion Jesus? Yeah, Lion Jesus." And then, almost for the first time, Lucy remembered the precious cordial that had been given her for a Christmas present. Her hands trembled so much that she could hardly undo the stopper, but she managed it in the end and poured a few drops into her brother's mouth. "There are other people wounded," said Aslan, while she was still looking eagerly into Edmund's pale face and wondering if the cordial would have any result. "Yes, I know," said Lucy crossly. "Wait a minute." "Daughter of Eve," said Aslan in a graver voice. "Others are also at the point of death. Must more people die for Edmund." "I'm sorry, Aslan," said Lucy, getting up and going with him. For the next half hour they were busy. she attending to the wounded while he restored those who had been turned into stone. When at last she was free to come back to Edmund, she found him standing on his feet, and not only healed of his wounds, but looking better than she had seen him look. Oh, for ages. Oh my god, no, I want Edmund to die. In fact, ever since his first term at that horrid school, which was where he had begun to go wrong, he had become his real old self again, and could look you in the face. And there on the field of battle, Aslan made him a knight. Does he know, whispered Lucy to Susan, what Aslan did for him? Does he know what the arrangement with the witch really was? Hush, no. Of course not, said Susan. Ought he to be told? Said Lucy. Oh, surely not, said Susan. It would be too awful for him. Think how you'd feel if you were he. All the same, I think he ought to know, said Lucy. But at that moment they were interrupted. That night they slept where they were. How Aslan provided food for all of them, I don't know. But somehow or other they found themselves all sitting down on the grass to a fine high tea at about 8 o'clock. Next day they began marching eastward down the side of the great river, and the next day after that, at about tea time, they actually reached the mouth. The castle of Cair Paravel on its little hill towered up above them. Before them were the sands, with rocks and little pools of salt water and seaweed, and the smell of the sea and long miles of bluish-green waves breaking for ever and ever on the beach. And oh, the cry of the seagulls. Have you heard it? Can you remember? Yes. That evening after tea, the 4 children all managed to get down to the beach again and get their shoes and stockings off and feel the sand between their toes. The next day was more solemn, for then, in the great hall of Cair Paravel, that wonderful hall with the ivory roof and the west hall hung with peacock's feathers, and the eastern door which looks towards the sea, in the presence of all their friends, to the sound of trumpets, Aslan solemnly crowned them and led them to the 4 thrones amid deafening shouts of "Long live King Peter! Long live Queen Susan! Long live King Edmund! Long live Queen Lucy!" Once a king or queen in Narnia, always a king or queen. Bear it well, sons of Adam, bear it well, daughters of Eve, said Aslan. And through the eastern door, which was wide open, came the voices of the mermen and the mermaids swimming close to the shore and singing in honor of their new kings and queens. So the children sat on their thrones, and scepters were put into their hands, and they gave rewards and honors to all their friends, to Tumnus the fawn, and to the beavers, and giant Rumblebuffin, to the leopards, and the good centaurs, and the good dwarfs, and to the lion. And that night there was a great feast in Cair Paravel, and revelry and dancing, and gold flashed and wine flowed, and answering to the music inside, but stranger, sweeter, and more piercing, came the music of the sea people. But amidst all these rejoicings Aslan himself quietly slipped away, and when the kings and queens noticed that he wasn't there, they said nothing about it, for Mr. Beaver had warned them. He'll be coming and going, he had said. One day you'll see him, and another you won't. He doesn't like being tied down, and of course he has other countries to attend to. It's quite all right. He'll often drop in. Only you mustn't press him. He's wild, you know, not like a tame lion. Wow, he's so cool. And now, as you see, the story is nearly, but not quite, at an end. These 2 kings and 2 queens governed Narnia well, and long and happy was their reign. At first much of their time was spent in seeking out the remnants of the White Witch's army and destroying them, and indeed for a long time there would be news of evil things lurking in the wilder parts of the forest. A haunting here and a killing there, a glimpse of a werewolf one month and a rumor of a hag the next. But in the end all that foul brood was stamped out. And they made good laws, and kept down the peace, and saved good trees from being unnecessarily cut down, and liberated young dwarfs and young satyrs from being sent to school. Wait, they don't have to go to school? Is that what we want? And generally stopped busybodies and interferers, and encouraged ordinary people who wanted to live and let live. They drove back the fierce giants, quite a different sort from giant Rumblebuffin, on the north of Narnia when they ventured across the frontier. They entered into friendship and alliance with countries beyond the sea, and paid them visits of state and received visits of state from them. And they themselves grew and changed as the years passed over them. Peter became a tall and deep-chested man and a great warrior, and he was called King Peter the Magnificent. How creative. And Susan grew into a tall and gracious woman with black hair that fell almost to her feet, and the kings of the countries beyond the sea began to send ambassadors asking for her hand in marriage. And she was called Susan the Gentle. Edmund was a graver and quieter man than Peter, and great in counsel and judgment. I feel like that doesn't match up with the rest of the story, gotta be honest. Edmund kind of fucking sucks. He was called King Edmund the Just. As for Lucy, she was always gay and golden-haired, and all princes in those parts desired her to be their queen, and her own people called her Queen Lucy the Valiant. So they lived in great joy, and if ever they remembered their life in this world, it was only as one remembers a dream. And one year it fell out that Tumnus, who was a middle-aged fawn by now and beginning to be stout, came down river and brought them news that the white stag had once more appeared in his parts. The white stag who would give you wishes if you caught him. So these 2 kings and 2 queens, with the principal members of their court, rode a hunting with horns and hounds in the western woods to follow the white stag. And had they not hunted long before, they had a sight of him. He led them a great pace over rough and smooth and through thick and thin, till the horses of all the courtiers were tired out, and these 4 were still following. And they saw the stag enter into a thicket where their horses could not follow. Then said King Peter, for they talked in quite a different style now, having been kings and queens for so long, "Fair consorts, let us now alight from our horses and follow this beast into the thicket, for in all my days I never hunted a nobler quarry." "Oh, God!" "Sir," said the others, "even so let us do." So they alighted and tied their horses to trees and went on into the thick wool on front. And as soon as they had entered it, Queen Susan said, "Fair friends, here is a great marvel, for I have seemed to see a tree of iron." "Madam," said King Edmund, "if you look well upon it, you shall see it is a pillar of iron with a lantern set on top thereof. By the lion's mane, a strange device." I don't understand anything that they're saying now, said King Peter. "To set a lantern here, where the trees cluster so thick about it, and so high above it, that if it were lit, it should give light to no man." Excuse me. "Sir," said Queen Lucy, "by likelihood when this post and this lamp were set here, there were smaller trees in this place, or fewer, or none. And this is a young wood, and the iron post is old." And they stood looking upon it. Then said King Edmund, "I know not how it is, but this lamp on the post worketh upon me strangely. It runs in my mind that I have seen the like before, as if it were in a dream, or in the dream of a dream." "Sir," answered they all, "it is even so with us also. And more," said Queen Lucy, "for it will not go out of my mind that if we pass this post and lantern, either we shall find strange adventures, or else some great change in our fortunes." "Madam," said King Edmund, "the like foreboding stirreth in my heart also." "And in mine, fair brother," said King Peter. "And in mine too," said Queen Susan. "Wherefore, by my counsel, we shall lightly return to our horses, and follow this white stag no further." "Madam," said King Peter, "therein I pray thee to have me excused. For never since we 4 were kings and queens in Narnia have we set our hands to any high matter, as battles, quests, feats of arms, acts of justice, and the like, and then given over, but always what we have taken in hand, the same we have achieved." I don't know what the fuck that means. "Sister," said Queen Lucy, "my royal brother speaks rightly, and it seems to me we should be ashamed if for any fearing or foreboding we turn back from following so noble a beast as now we have in chase." "And so say I," said King Edmund, "and I have such desire to find the signification of this thing, that I would not by my good will turn back for the richest jewel in all Narnia and the islands." "What? Why do they talk like this?" "Then the name of Aslan," said Queen Susan, "if ye will all have it so, let us go on and take the adventure that shall fall to us." Last page. End Mond. Exactly. Hashtag end Mond. Yeah, I got my exams in 4 days. Oh, I hope you're studying good then. Best of luck. Because uneducated monarchs are always great. Oh, so true. That's why no one goes to school. God forbid they have brains. I'm not gonna lie, I have not been studying. Chris, come on now. Chris, come on. So these kings and queens entered the thicket, and before they had gone a score of paces, they all remembered that the thing they had seen was called a lamp-post. Before they had gone 20 more, they noticed that they were making their way not through branches, but through coats. The next moment, they all came tumbling out of a wardrobe door to the empty room. They were no longer kings and queens in their hunting array, but just Peter, Susan, Edmund, and Lucy in their old clothes. It It was the same day and the same hour of the day on which they had all gone into the wardrobe to hide. Mrs. Macbrady and the visitors were still talking in the passage, but luckily they never came into the empty room until the children weren't caught. That would have been the very end of the story if it hadn't been that they really must explain to the professor why 4 of the coats out of his wardrobe were missing. And the professor, who was a very remarkable man, didn't tell them not to be silly or not to tell lies, but believed the whole story. No, he said, I don't think it will be any good trying to go back the wardrobe door to get the coats. You won't get into Narnia again by that route, nor would the coats be much use now if you did. Eh? What's that? Yes, of course you'll get back to Narnia again some day. What's a king in Narnia? Always a king in Narnia. Don't go trying to use the same route twice. Why? Indeed, don't try to get there at all. It'll happen when you're not looking for it. And don't talk too much about it, even among yourselves. And don't mention it to anyone else unless you find that they've had adventures of the same sort themselves. What's that? How will you know? Oh, you'll know all right. Odd things they say, even their looks, will let the secret out. Keep your eyes open. Bless me. What do they teach them at these schools? And that is the very end of the adventure of the wardrobe. But if the professor is right, it is the only beginning of the adventures of Narnia. The end. We are done. I don't know why I'm just kind of booking it. I feel like I can do it, but it's grade 2 book. You should study a little bit, at least. you know. But, okay, that was The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe. The first. God, I'm sleepy. The first book in the Chronicles of Narnia. It was a pretty good book. Also, I don't have much to compare it to because I don't read books really. But it was very whimsical. And I really like how they described all the fantasy elements. The story itself's a little insane, but, like, I kind of appreciate it for that. Now read the Bible? No. Anyhow, a little under 3 hours. I'm going to end it here, and I don't know when we'll read the next one. Like, I don't want to make it, like, super frequent. If people liked it in the future. I already can't believe you. Don't even start. But I think once in a while, it's kind of chill, kind of nice. Anyhow, thank you guys so much for coming. I'm actually surprised as many of you were here as you were. I thought there would probably be not many, but I am pleasantly surprised. I hope you all have a great rest of your day or night. Till next time, which will be tomorrow, which I'm going to try to set up crowd control Minecraft, hopefully. I just like chatting. Yeah, it's understandable. Ite, ite.